Chapter 301, The Terrifying Seal of Treasure Mountain. I didn't think you would even know about the Seal of Treasure Mountain our Shi family took possession of a few dozen years ago. Shi Xiangran laughed darkly. Immediately putting away her longbow on her back, she continued to run before turning her head towards Jian Chen as she called out to him, "Scoundrel, we have to run." Even as she cried out to him, she was already running far away with a panicked look. Jian Chen looked at the frantic girl with some confusion. He was completely puzzled. Could the iron chunk in Shi Xiangran's hand contain some sort of terrifying power? Despite the confusion, Jian Chen knew that he was completely unaware of whatever secret it might contain. Without any hesitation, he turned and began to run from Shi Xiangran. With the Seal of Treasure Mountain, you shouldn't even think about escaping. Shi Xiangran's face grew dark as he threw the iron chunk into the air. As soon as it flew into the air, the iron chunk began to transform into a 100-meter-long circumference iron seal as it flew toward Jian Chen's head at an inconceivable speed. Jian Chen's eyes widened as he stared in complete shock at the base of the pitch-black iron seal. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Jian Chen could swear that he had never once seen or heard about something like this before. Just what is this eccentric item? Jian Chen thought with shock and curiosity. However, the floating iron seal didn't give Jian Chen any time to think, and immediately came down on Jian Chen with a huge amount of pressure. It was with a startling realization that Jian Chen had finally figured out the secret behind the iron seal. This was used for smashing people. If anyone were to be smashed by this, then they would take a tremendous amount of damage. Jian Chen quickly ran outside. The 100-meter-long circumference iron seal descended so quickly that before Jian Chen had even run 20 meters outwards, the iron seal was already falling down towards his head. With an explosive shout, Jian Chen brought his saint weapon up against the base of the iron seal in hopes of slowing its descent. Just then, the density of the iron seal far outweighed the force Jian Chen exerted. With a bang, the seal slammed Jian Chen's body down through the earth, leaving behind an unbelievably deep crater. In front, the shocked girl saw that Jian Chen had been pressed into the ground. Flustered, she stopped running and immediately cursed out loud, "You scoundrel, how could you be this stupid? I told you to run, but you stood there like an idiot. An idiot's death. That's what you deserve. You dared to go against our Shi family, so this is where you depart from life and die like the beggar you are." Shi Xiangran spat as he stared at the crater left behind by Jian Chen. The strength of the Seal of Treasure Mountain was clear to see. Ever since the Shi family had gained control of it, it sat within their secured treasure room, its legend passed down from generation to generation. Up until now, its strength had been unimaginable and never had there been an Earth Saint Master that was able to survive a single impact. Shi Xiangran lifted his hand, causing the floor ahead of him to start trembling. Immediately, the giant seal began to lift up from the ground. It shrank back down to a chunk the size of his fist, and landed in his hand. After securing his treasure, Shi Xiangran turned back to the dead, middle-aged men behind him and took their space belts. Then, with the barrier still activated, he turned to chase after the girl. Just as the seal left the crater to return to Shi Xiangran, a muddy figure suddenly flew out of the hole like a lightning bolt, and stabbed at Shi Xiangran with his sword Qi-enhanced sword. Shi Xiangran was extremely shocked, but with his strength as an Earth Saint Master, he could react in time to respond. Holding out his long spear in front of him, the barrier reactivated once more. With the barrier activated, the silver sword continued to be pushed back farther and farther away from his body. "You! How did you not die?" Shi Xiangran cried out as he looked at the muddy figure. This type of result wasn't something he had expected to see. Seeing how his attack was repelled by the barrier, the muddy Jian Chen could only sigh in disappointment. Quickly kneeling down to the ground, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Shi Xiangran sneered at the sight, "You are the first Earth Saint Master to not die from the Seal of Treasure Mountain. Be proud of that achievement. It would seem that the seal has done a good amount of damage to you. Then allow me to use the seal once more to end your life. An Earth Saint Master can't take a second hit from this. You should have no regrets with your death this time." With this, Jian Chen narrowed his eyes. Having learned his lesson, he quickly began to retreat backwards. The seal of Treasure Mountain immediately enlarged before flying towards Jian Chen. The overwhelming pressure from the seal almost suffocated Jian Chen. After taking a single hit from the seal, Jian Chen finally understood just how strong this strange seal was. If he were to be smashed by this seal once more, then it would all be over. Even if he didn't die, he would be forced to his dying breath anyway. Damn it all, what kind of an object is this for it to be so strong? And just why haven't I heard of such a thing before? Jian Chen cursed as he looked at the giant seal flying towards him. Even when he was in Kargath Library, he had never seen any information about such a thing. The seal of Treasure Mountain flew at tremendous speeds, and with Jian Chen's injuries, he could not run as fast as before. This meant he would not be able to outrun the seal. Even now as he glanced back, the seal was already quickly approaching him. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Suddenly, a concentrated amount of fire could be heard as a series of golden arrows flew through the air and smashed against the seal. Bang! Following the loud bang, the iron seal began to shake for a moment before flying at Jian Chen at a slightly reduced speed. Seeing how the iron seal was about to end Jian Chen's life, the yellow-robed girl immediately stopped running and withdrew her longbow to shoot at the seal with frightening speed. Each arrow allowed Jian Chen another moment to run away to escape from Xiangran. You repulsive wench. Wait until I grab a hold of you, I'll definitely torture you to death. Xiangran glared at the girl with a malicious look as he roared and gnashed his teeth in anger. Scoundrel, hurry up and get to where I am. The girl ignored Xiangran and cried out for Jian Chen to follow her. After hearing the girl, Jian Chen didn't hesitate any longer and immediately threw himself in her direction as the iron seal followed close behind. She continued to pull back her bowstring, and arrow after arrow continued to fly at the seal, causing multiple explosions to rock the air. With the girl's assistance, Jian Chen finally pulled far away from the seal and arrived where the girl was. Hurry up. The seal of Treasure Mountain is incomparably strong. If it smashes into a Heaven Saint Master, even they will take on heavy damages. It's a good thing that Xiangran's strength isn't that high, otherwise he'd be able to use the seal of Treasure Mountain to its fullest potential. The woman cried as she continued to fire arrows at the seal while retreating backwards. The seal of Treasure Mountain's advance was slowed as each arrow shot by the girl exploded upon impact. At the same time, she and Jian Chen continued to run away from it. After a certain distance, the girl aimed her bow at Xiangran. Although her arrow wouldn't be able to hurt him, the explosive arrows would still prevent him from moving forwards. The seal of Treasure Mountain can't get 50 meters out of his reach, otherwise it'll be uncontrollable. The girl explained to Jian Chen as if she was very familiar with the treasure. As the two ran farther and farther away, Xiangran could only watch from afar while being pelted with arrows. They eventually disappeared from sight. 4 hours later, Jian Chen and the girl finally came to a stop 10 kilometers away, and found a mountain cave to take refuge in. The cave wasn't too large, and there were even traces of someone having enlarged the hole. Sounds of crackling could occasionally be heard from the small campfire lighting up the cave. Jian Chen lay powerless on the ground with a pale face. First, he had been hurt by the girl's arrows and then fought in a battle with her. Then, before his body had even healed from his wounds, he had been smashed deep into the ground by the giant iron seal. This had caused more damage to his body than he was used to, and had even threatened his life. Right now his entire body was crushed and damaged to a large extent. If a regular Earth Saint Master were to be hit by the seal of Treasure Mountain, then they would have died for sure. The sounds of clothes being torn could be heard as the girl tended to the wound on her arm behind a large rock. The longbow continued to stay on her back for safety. Cough. Jian Chen coughed twice as 2 mouthfuls of blood flew out from his mouth. With his current injuries, it was imperative that he heal as quickly as possible. However, with the girl nearby, he wasn't able to use his Radiant Saint Force to heal himself. If he were to use it, then his secret would definitely be revealed. Jianshan didn't want his secret regarding the Radiant Saint Force to be revealed, since everyone knew that Radiant Saint Masters were completely inept in martial arts. They could be said to be extremely weak. Since he was an Earth Saint Master and his aptitude with the Radiant Saint Force wasn't bad at all, then there would definitely be a lot of trouble for him if it were to be revealed. If he were to silently endure the pain and try to circulate his inner Saint Force, then his healing factor would be somewhat accelerated. At that moment, the girl came out from behind the stone with her wounds all dressed. Looking at the muddy Jianshan, her eyes revealed a rare emotion of worry before quickly being hidden once more. Holding out a single white jade bottle toward Jianshan, she said, "This is my family's secret healing panacea. Go and use it." Chapter 302, Legend of the Ruler Armament. Taking the jade white bottle into his own hands silently, Jianshan poured the contents into his mouth. Right now he couldn't use the Radiant Saint Force to heal, so he desperately needed to use medicine to heal. Plus, with his 1000 immunity, he wasn't afraid of the girl handing him any type of poison. The contents of the bottle weren't in pill form and was actually in a liquid form which tasted rather bitter. Jianshan poured the liquid within his mouth in one go and swallowed. The moment it entered his body, a warm sensation traveled through his body slowly before covering every single part of it. Feeling a great change happen within his body, Jianshan closed his eyes to allow the healing process to begin. However, he still maintained a strong vigilance to the outside world. Although he and the girl were now on equal terms, but who could guarantee that nothing would happen? Who knew if this girl from a grand and rich family would suddenly strike at him with her sword? Looking at Jianshan close his eyes while he healed with a complicated look, the girl walked over to the campfire silently. Sitting down, she held her knees together with both hands and stared at the dancing fire with her bright and intelligent eyes, her thoughts unknown to the world. The cave descended into an unnatural quiet, only the sounds of the crackling fire could be heard. With the tree branches feeding the fire, it would occasionally let out a snapping sound. As Jianshan continued to heal, the girl never struck out at him once. Instead, she sat by the fire and continued to watch the flames dance absent-mindedly. 4 hours later, Jianshan opened his eyes and crawled up in a sitting position with some effort as his arms leaned against the cold cliff walls. After these 4 hours of treatment, he had completely absorbed the healing properties of the medicine. Although he was still far away from being completely healed, he was at the very least stabilized for now. Noticing the yellow-clothed girl sitting by the fire, his eyes latched onto the golden bow on her back. "Could you tell me, just what type of weapon that bow is on your back? How is it possible for it contains so much strength? And the man that was chasing you with the seal of Treasure Mountain, just what type of weapon was that? It's plain to see that it's not your saint weapon, but the power was completely terrifying." Jianshan asked with curiosity as his heart raced to hear the answer. Hearing that Jianshan was awake, the girl tilted her head up to look at Jianshan before immediately turning back to the dancing flames without a word. Jianshan didn't ask again. He knew that this matter was extremely secretive, and if the girl wasn't willing to tell him, then he wouldn't beg. Those weapons are ruler armaments. After some time, the girl finally spoke. The conditions of making a ruler armament are very unkind. There aren't many of them within the Tian Yuan continent, and it is said that ruler armaments are the weapons of saint rulers. After a saint ruler dies, instead of their saint weapon decomposing away into the world, they retain their form perfectly. The girl slowly began to explain as she held her longbow. Then silently, she said, "This longbow's name is the Solunar Bow. This is our Huang family's ruler armament that has been passed down from generation to generation and has become our ancient family heirloom for the next generation. If this ruler armament was formed by a saint weapon, then it is no wonder it's this strong." Jianshan thought to himself. The seal of Treasure Mountain within Shi Xiangran's hand is also a ruler armament. Although it isn't as strong as my Solunar Bow, combined with his superior strength, he is already a second cycle Earth Saint Master. With the seal of Treasure Mountain, he is much stronger than me even with my Solunar Bow. The girl explained. What is that barrier he has on him? Jianshan continued to ask. If it weren't for that barrier, then he would have killed Shi Xiangran already. That barrier was something a saint ruler put on him. Its defensive ability is remarkably strong, so even my lunar bow is unable to break it. The girl narrowed her eyes. Regarding the barrier of Shi Xiangran, she felt like having a headache each time she heard about it. Is there any way for us to break it or for it to fade away? Jian Chen asked. The girl said, if there is, then I'm unable to do it. If the barrier is attacked with an attack far beyond what it can handle, then it'll naturally shatter. Other than that, the barrier will fade away with time, but how long it'll take for that to happen, I don't know. Gnashing her teeth, she spoke angrily, if it weren't for the barrier protecting Shi Xiangran, I would have shot him dead a long time ago. How vile the Shi family is. For them to use the gathering of the mercenaries to steal our Huang family's ruler armament. It's unfortunate that my fellow family had fallen prey to the evil schemes of the Shi family for the sake of allowing me to run away. Just wait until we're out, then I'll have Uncle Feng and Uncle Yun avenge the death of my family members. The girl spoke with an angry promise. Hearing that, Jian Chen laughed. I'm sure that I heard Shi Xiangran say that he will have men deal with your two uncles, leaving you unprotected. Clenching her fists tightly, she spat out, abominable Shi family. They continue to try to take our lunar bow, they must have planned everything out. Jian Chen couldn't help but to take in some delight from this. Shi Xiangran has that barrier protecting him, making him intangible. Along with his ruler armament, he has truly come prepared. It would appear that your Huang family's lunar bow is destined to fall into their hands. The girl snapped as she flew up with her arms raised as she stared vehemently at Jian Chen. You should learn to be quiet, you scoundrel, or else see what happens when I'm through with you. All I'm saying is the truth. Jian Chen had no fear, as if he felt secure in his knowledge. The girl continued to stare angrily at Jian Chen for a while before finally sighing and walking to the entrance of the cave. Her departure was what Jian Chen had wanted. Using his hearing to listen to see how far away the girl was, Jian Chen began to use his Radiant Saint Force to heal himself. The Radiant Saint Force began to gather slowly and illuminated the dark cave in an instant. The Radiant Saint Force began to condense into a milky white light that made the inside of the cave seem as if it was daytime. Within this previously dark cave, the Radiant Saint Force would have caused anyone that noticed it to instantly become awake. The bright light was as fierce as the sun itself, but while it continued to shine brightly, the sight was not intense on the eyes. Controlling the Radiant Saint Force required the usage of spirit. With Jian Chen's spirit increasing in amount and quality after he made the breakthrough to become an Earth Saint Master, his spirit had become more refined. It could be used to improve his usage of the Radiant Saint Force to an even higher height, and so not only was the Radiant Saint Force even richer in quality, but the time to make it was less now. Another 2 hours later, the Radiant Saint Force had completely healed Jian Chen at a rate that could only be described as miraculous. Now that Jian Chen's health was back to normal, he immediately leaped up from the ground and took out a water canteen from his space ring. Shedding off his clothes, he began to clean himself. This source of water was something Jian Chen had planned since the beginning. Since his space ring was spacious enough, he had been able to collect plenty of water gourds that weighed at 25 kilograms each. This was enough for him to last a while even in the most dire of circumstances. Hua hua. The ice-cold water splashed against Jian Chen's head as the remaining filth flowed away from his body. When the water hit the ground, it made a splashing sound as it scattered in every direction with a sharp and loud sound. At this moment, the yellowed-clothed girl was sitting on a rock right outside the cave entrance with a look of worry. She was concerned about the words Jian Chen had said to her. The Shi family were definitely prepared this time, and while Uncle Feng and Yun were both quite strong, the Shi family had plenty of experts that could fight against those two. If the words of Shi Xiangran could be trusted, then their family had already employed some people to deal with the two. If this was the case, then she would have no one to rely on. In this place, Shi Xiangran still had that defensive barrier, so her lunar bow wasn't able to do anything against him despite its power. At this moment, the seal of Treasure Mountain was a ruler armament as well. In the case that Shi Xiangran were to use it against her lunar bow, then she would have no opportunity to strike at him. Although it could be said that she could use her lunar bow against his barrier, at the very most it would be a stalemate for a small amount of time. She couldn't use the bow forever since it would drain her saint force at an incredible rate. I'll definitely protect the lunar bow. If worst comes to worst, I'll have to rely on Mercenary City and wait for the clan to help. I doubt the Sure family would dare to fight against Mercenary City for it. The girl spoke in an icy tone. At this moment, a strange sound could be heard inside the cave. Immediately, the girl turned toward the sound confused as she stared within the dark abyss of the cave. How strange, how could there be any sound? The scoundrel is heavily injured, so he shouldn't be able to move at all. With an uneasy heart, she began to quietly move toward the insides of the cave. At this moment, Jian Shen had just finished bathing himself. Although the girl was walking deeper into the cave, she wasn't leaking any killing intent, imposing aura or any dangerous thoughts. Because of the heavy sounds of the water hitting the ground, Jian Shen had been unable to detect the sounds of her walking in. Quickly, the girl continued to walk in with a curious expression. Walking in with a cautious attitude, the moment she clearly saw the scene inside, her face immediately froze. In that instant, she could see that Jian Shen had just finished showering and was completely naked. Ah! You rotten scoundrel! The girl was quick to react and shrieked with a loud sound. Guadong! The gourd that Jian Shen had above his head immediately fell to the floor with a crashing sound as it broke. Quickly, Jian Shen grabbed a set of clothes from within his space ring and flew to a dark corner of the cave. Not even caring for the wet droplet on his body, he hurriedly began to dress himself. By that point, the girl had already covered both her eyes with her hands as she looked elsewhere. Her beautiful face had instantly turned bright as her heart couldn't help but beat wildly. Chapter 303, Uniting after walking out, the girl never returned to the inside of the cave. Even Jian Shen, who had changed into a new pair of clothes, had turned red in the face. He had felt embarrassed to a major degree and even a little angry. He didn't think that the girl wouldn't have any manners and would walk in without making her presence known. If it weren't for her quick reaction, Jian Shen would have assumed that she didn't have a grudge at all for him seeing her naked body, and today would be the day that she would return the favor. If Jian Shen's thoughts were to be discovered by this girl, then drowning himself in a river wouldn't be enough for the girl. After putting on some clothes, Jian Shen walked out of the cave where the girl stood not too far away with her back facing him. Even though he couldn't see her face, Jian Shen could see the two sides of her neck were bright red, meaning her cheeks must have been as well. After being discovered completely naked by a girl as he showered, it was completely hard for Jian Shen to not feel embarrassed. He still managed to hold a serious look on his face as he spoke out, "Hey, how could you be so rude and walk in without a sound to look at me while I shower?" A few years back, after accidentally seeing the girl's body, he had suffered greatly from it. Now that the girl had silently and sneakily walked into the cave as he bathed, this was an opportunity that Jian Shen would not dare to miss. The girl had initially been embarrassed, but the moment she heard Jian Shen say that she snuck in to look at him shower, her red face immediately grew murderous. No longer feeling ashamed, she turned around to look at him. "Pa, who says I was trying to look at you shower? Do you even have any eyes?" Jian Shen was speechless. To avoid having water in his eyes, he had shut them, so he didn't see the girl's figure. However, he had heard her shriek. With an honest expression, he spoke evenly, "My two eyes can see perfectly fine." "Pa, what a scoundrel you are, do you even feel any shame? Let me ask you this, that cave was originally mine, I was kind in allowing you to stay there for now, but then you began to take a shower without even telling me. This was your fault in the first place, so don't go blaming me." The girl fired back in order to retain her pride. Before Jian Shen could say anything to use against her, she would have to try to win the argument first. "This cave had been made by someone else, just when did it become yours?" Jian Shen asked, bewildered. "This is a cave with no owner, but since I was the first to enter, then naturally I would be the owner of the cave," the girl said confidently. Arguing was a specialty that she was good at. Jianchen wasn't convinced by her words and was left speechless. He knew that if he argued with her, he would lose for sure. There weren't too many people that he'd met that he couldn't kill, and equally less people that were stronger than him. However, a fight of words was a different story. The points Jianchen made were eaten up by her. Logic was not something that agreed with her. Her logic was both preposterous and stubborn. The girl could say that 1 was 2 and that 2 was 3, and would be very confident in herself. Logic was not something that agreed with her, and the words that Jianchen had tried to use to win had been eaten up by her. You win. Jianchen spoke with a huff. He hadn't planned on letting her win, but who could have imagined that not even 2 sentences later, she had fully suppressed him with her words and given him no chance to win. I've seen your body and you've seen mine. But I've also saved your life, so let's consider this even. If I owe you in the future, tell me. With that, Jianchen began to walk away without a look back. Yo, you rogue. Upon hearing Jianchen say that he had seen her body, the girl immediately grew flustered as her mind couldn't help but think back to that one time. Her beautiful face instantly lit up with a reddish hue. Immediately, her good mood after beating Jianchen shriveled away as she grew both embarrassed and angry. Who told you to save me anyways? I didn't ask you. If it weren't for me impeding the seal of Treasure Mountain, then you would have long since been smashed to pieces by it. The girl said angrily as she tried to find a way to fire back at him. Hearing that, Jianchen immediately stopped moving. The situation was like she said, if it weren't for her using her lunar bow to control the seal, that he wouldn't have been able to escape from the seal. He didn't want to say that to her, so he continued to walk away. At this moment, the girl had finally realized that Jianchen's wounds were completely healed and he was back to normal. Stunned, the girl couldn't understand just how Jianchen had been able to recover thoroughly from his injuries in such a short period of time. Hey, scoundrel, how did you heal from your injuries so fast? The girl asked from behind with a hint of anger. Her bright eyes burned with curiosity as she stared at him. I had some good medicine on hand. Jianchen didn't want to answer, but avoiding the question would have made the girl even more insistent on figuring out his secret. For the sake of dispelling her questions and doubts, he would have to carefully think of a reason. With this, Jianchen had already moved farther and farther away and nearly made it out of the girl's sight. Seeing Jianchen's back, the girl felt a bit indecisive. After biting her lower lip, she shouted out loud, "Stand still, you scoundrel, where are you going?" Quickly, she had caught up with Jianchen, who didn't turn back to look at her. Instead, he spoke calmly, "Just why are you following me?" "Pa, who's following you?" The girl blinked. "You've killed 2 of the Shi family experts, so there is no way that they'll let you go. With the barrier of Shi Xiangran and his seal of Treasure Mountain, you won't be a match for him by yourself. If I'm not there with you, then you won't be able to live if Shi Xiangran catches hold of you. You're the one that's afraid," Jianchen said. The girl's eyes narrowed. "I'm not afraid of anything, you scoundrel. Don't speak any more lies or I'll smash you into several pieces. If not for that bow, you aren't even an opponent for me, and even with that bow, you won't be able to beat me." Jianchen almost seemed to forget about his unhappy state and spoke with the emotionless tone he had before all of this had even happened. The girl grew quite angry now as her chest constricted with rage, but there was nothing she could say. Even in the injured state Jianchen had been, he was still able to kill 2 Earth Saint Masters from the Shi family in record time before fighting against Shi Xiangran himself. His strength was definitely stronger than her own. In silence, the girl began to calm down before finally speaking out unwillingly, "Shi Xiangran's strength you've seen for yourself. With his defensive barrier, you have no way of harming him. Furthermore, he has the power to use the seal of Treasure Mountain whenever he wishes. If any one of us 2 were to come across him by ourselves, then we will surely eat up a heavy loss or even die. My lunar bow can impede Shi Xiangran for some time and control the seal of Treasure Mountain, and you can personally deal with anyone Shi Xiangran will bring. This is the only way we'll survive against him." The girl hadn't lost any face from her words, but the way she had cleverly spoken had emphasized just how much she wanted to join forces with him. Pausing to think, Jian Chen nodded his head in approval of her plan. After killing 2 of the Shi family experts, the Shi family would definitely not forgive him for this. Shi Xiangran's defensive barrier was far too strong for the Lunar Bao to break, and if Jian Chen's azure and violet sword qi weren't enough to shatter the barrier, then Jian Chen would have no other option. Shi Xiangran had been completely unrestrainable, hidden behind his barrier. He could use his seal of Treasure Mountain to attack relentlessly. At that time, if the girl didn't use her Lunar Bao to hold back the seal of Treasure Mountain, then it would have been truly hard for him to run away. Even if he did run away from it, he would still have to waste the entire day running away from Shi Xiangran. Shi Xiangran's use of his treasure had rendered Jian Chen helpless, but if the treasure were to fall from Shi Xiangran's hands, then Jian Chen wouldn't see him as anyone strong. To be chased down and killed by someone that he didn't see as worthy would be an unbearable shame to him. So to unite with this girl would be a good plan. Jian Chen and the girl continued to travel in silence. Not even idle chatter was heard or even an introduction spoken, so neither person knew the other's name. In their hearts, it was as if the other person didn't exist. On the road, when many competitors saw just how young Jian Chen was and how beautiful the girl next to him was, they were extremely surprised. Previously, there had been 2 men that were barely great Saint Masters and even a few Earth Saint Masters that had clearly underestimated Jian Chen. The vast majority of them had been stabbed through the throat by Jian Chen's sword, while the small minority had been killed by the yellow-clothed girl after they spoke out in a rude manner toward her. One Earth Saint Master had even been blown up by her Lunar Bao and died a miserable and violent death. While she herself looked quite young, she was no stranger to killing. Despite not being at the level of Jian Chen, who was always calm, her expression remained the same during each kill and she delivered each blow firmly. This caused Jian Chen to secretly admire her. For a child of a rich family to be able to do this much was a hard task, especially if she was the highly valued young daughter. Half a month quickly went by as Jian Chen and the girl traveled without seeing Shi Xiangran. By now, they had traveled far away from the sword-like mountains and were now at a mountain range with grass everywhere. In this amount of time, Jian Chen and the girl continued to give each other the cold shoulder. They rarely spoke to each other or even chatted at all. The only thing worth mentioning was that in this half a month of time, the both of them had gained a plethora of profit. Each one of them had now a total of 1,000 tokens after killing several Earth Saint Masters. Even some of the great Saint Masters they had killed had at least 50 tokens. Only a month and a couple days were left with the time limit for the first round rapidly approaching. In this short amount of time, the tokens would all be congregated among the Earth Saint Masters. Very few great Saint Masters would be able to keep hold of their tokens. Just as Jian Chen and the girl were climbing on a huge slope, the sounds of battle could be heard to Jian Chen. Looking toward the source, he could see a man with Wind Saint force surrounding his body fighting against 2 Earth Saint Masters. Not too far away from them was a blood-soaked figure that was laying on the ground. The Wind-attributed Earth Saint Master was extremely strong. Just by himself, he could fight against 2 Earth Saint Masters and slowly win. Both of them had plenty of injuries on their body, causing their clothes to be dyed red with blood. The Wind-attributed Earth Saint Master, however, didn't have a single scratch on him. Subconsciously, Jian Chen looked over to where the battered individual lay. Straight away, he could see a sturdy-like build that seemed quite familiar to him. Following a closer inspection, Jian Chen's eyes suddenly flew wide open as a dangerous gleam appeared within. As soon as his eyes widened, a feeling of bloodlust could be felt. Chapter 304, Meeting Qin Shao, Qin Shao. Jian Chen roared angrily as his entire figure blurred away from sight. With a lightning-like speed, Jian Chen flew toward the 3 men who were currently fighting. At the same time, an enormous amount of killing intent began to exude from his body, shooting straight into the air. The girl watched as Jian Chen sped away with a flabbergasted look. She was previously standing right next to him with her golden longbow out. From the days she had traveled with Jian Chen, she had quickly learned his personality, but this was the first time she had seen such a drastic change in him. She hastened after Jian Chen. Jian Chen's roar was immediately heard by the three combatants. The two blood-soaked figures were shocked. They hadn't expected to come across anyone that was familiar with the young lord of the Tianqin clan. The two of them had already used up all of their strength fighting and were immensely relieved to see a new chance at life. The moment they saw Jian Chen run toward them, their happy look froze in place before disappearing from their faces and were instead replaced with looks of utter despair. The both of them knew Jian Chen and how he was the only foreign friend of Qin Shao, but while his talent at cultivation wasn't all that bad, Jian Chen was still young and only a great Saint Master. Their opponent was an Earth Saint Master and a truly strong one at that, with his Wind Saint force. If the two of them combined wouldn't be able to force him to a disadvantage, Jian Chen wouldn't be able to. By this point, the Wind-attributed Earth Saint Master had noticed Jian Chen. The moment he saw the handsome look on Jian Chen, his face immediately lost his look of confidence. A deep feeling of dread washed over him as he lost all of his desire to fight. I'll let you go today." The Earth Saint Master spat out unwillingly before flying into the air to run away. Just as the man left, one of the heavily injured men that lost most of his saint force immediately lost consciousness. The other man had no energy remaining either and fell to the ground on his back with a withered expression. Qin Shao, Qin Shao. How are you feeling? Wake up." Jian Chen quickly arrived at Qin Zhao's side while calling out his name repeatedly in a frantic manner. Qin Zhao's wounds were rather severe and he was covered with blood. Even the surrounding grass beneath him was soaked with his blood. On his body, Jian Chen noticed two terrifyingly deep wounds. Right on his waist, Qin Zhao's body was nearly cut in two with only around half of his body still connected. The other wound was on his chest where a sword had been run through, causing a severe amount of damage to even his inner organs. Qin Shao right now was already halfway through the gates of the underworld. "Quick, use your bow to shoot him down. Don't let him escape." Jian Chen roared as he pointed at the rapidly disappearing figure of the Wind-attributed Earth Saint Master to the yellow-clothed girl. Coming into view, the girl already had a hand reaching toward her bow in order to kill the man, but the moment she had heard the commanding tone of Jian Chen, her eyebrows narrowed as she dropped her hands. Returning her hands to where they originally were, she spoke with a frosty tone. "I refuse to. Why should I listen to you?" Bang! Jian Chen's fist slammed into the ground, creating a half-a-meter hole deep into the soft ground. The bloodshot eyes of Jian Chen stared dangerously at the girl as his rage continued to fly into the air. This time, Jian Chen was truly angry. Seeing the nearly bloodthirsty animal-like visage of Jian Chen, the girl's heart shook with some fear before stopping in place. In this moment of clarity, she suddenly felt a great deal of regret. When she refused to shoot the escaping person and lost her attention, the Wind-attributed Earth Saint Master had traveled past the mountain range and out of sight. Jian Chen. Just as Jian Chen was about to use the Radiant Saint Force to heal Qin Zhao's wounds, a faint-sounding voice could be heard as Qin Zhao's eyes opened just a crack. His mouth trembled slightly as he called out Jian Chen's name quietly. "Qin Shao, hold on. I'll heal you up in a moment." Jian Chen began to control the Radiant Saint Force around the World Essence to heal Qin Shao. Right now Qin Shao was in extreme danger. His life was hanging on by a thread and could be cut at any moment. Jian Chen. Qin Zhao's eyes opened a little more as his right arm quavered in an attempt to grab onto Jian Chen's hands. Slowly placing it on his space belt, he began to speak. "He. Help. Me br bring, out. A gre green, bibo bottle. Out, fr from, my. SP spa space. Belt." Qin Zhao's voice was beginning to fade in and out as his voice grew faint. With a faint exhale, his head tilted down and he fell unconscious. Jian Chen understood what Qin Zhao's message was right away. Carefully taking his space belt without touching Qin Zhao's wounds, he began to furiously search within the contents before finally taking out 3 green porcelain bottles. Just as Jian Chen took out the 3 bottles and opened them, a sweet-smelling fragrance could be detected. Each bottle contained a thumb-sized pill that exuded a faint white glow. This is... Jianchen cried out in shock and recognition. While the 3 pellets had a faint powder look on the shell, inside the shell was a pure amount of radiant saint force. Jianchen was like a radiant saint master and clearly understood the effects of the radiant saint force. Immediately grabbing the pellets, he placed them into Qin Zhao's mouth. After swallowing the pill, Qin Zhao's face began to take a turn for the better in color. Despite the radiant saint force-filled pill not being enough to fully heal Qin Zhao, saving his life would be no problem at all. However, Qin Zhao had yet to awaken. After Qin Zhao's condition was stabilized, Jianchen let out a breath in relief. Then he turned to the 2 blood-soaked men. He had recognized the 2 men. One of them was Qin Zhu, the one that Qin Zhao had said his father had picked up from the outside world and raised. He was born and raised within the Tianqin clan and had an extremely loyal heart, but right now he was unconscious. The other man also wasn't a Tianqin clan member and was one of the men who had entered the space gate to Mercenary City with him. He was the comrade of Tian Zhou, but right now his face was deathly pale as he sat on the ground and ate a healing pill to recover his strength. 3 men quickly came into Jianchen's line of sight at a quick speed. The 3 men were quickly detected by everyone, eldest brother. Suddenly, a joyous sound could be heard as the slowly healing person looked at the 3 approaching men and tried to crawl up to meet them. These 3 men were unexpectedly Tian Zhou and 2 other brothers from outside the Tianqin clan. 4th brother. 4th brother. 4th brother. Tian Zhou and the other 2 were quick to recognize the blood-soaked figure and instantly called out in panic as they ran to his side. 4th brother, how are you feeling? Who did this to you? 4th brother, tell us, just which bastard beat you to this state? Seeing the blood-soaked figure of their brother, the other 2 men were furious. Tian Zhou's own face was rather unsightly as the 3 began to look around only to see the unconscious figure of the young lord of the Tianqin clan, Jianchen, and the golden longbow girl right next to him. Who are you? One of the men roared at the girl. They all knew who Jianchen was, but not who this new girl was. The girl looked at the 3 in disdain as she turned her head arrogantly to the side. It was as if she wasn't willing to talk or even look at them. Seeing the attitude of the girl, the other man barked at her coldly, "Naughty girl, we asked you a question, are you deaf?" After he spoke, the girl's expression darkened as she stared at them with a hateful glare. "Say one more word and I'll kill you." She had guessed that Jianchen knew these men, and if it weren't for that, then she would have long since moved against these people. After all, these 3 men were Earth Saint Masters and would undoubtedly have many tokens with them. "You," the man she spoke to growled angrily as a machete-like weapon appeared within his hands, "you must be tired of living. I'll teach you a lesson then." With that, he flew at her. "Hey, 2nd brother, don't be so reckless. You shouldn't act so soon against a beauty like her." Immediately, a rather ugly-looking man held out his hand to stop the other man from attacking as he looked at the girl with a lecherous gaze. Hearing this, the 2nd brother was stunned for a moment before realizing what was happening. With a dark laugh, he spoke, "3rd brother, you're the smart one among us. It would be a crying shame for this beautiful woman to die so soon." Then, speaking to the girl, he laughed once more, "Little beauty, I've changed my mind. Killing such a beautiful person would be a big shame. Why don't you accompany us for a good time? If you can make this a pleasurable time, then big brother here will let you go." The girl's face froze over in a dark expression. Hearing this, even Jianchen's face grew dark. Although he had plenty of complaints about her, he couldn't respect the 2 for their words now, that the girl and him were both on the same side. Lastly, Tian Zhou and his brothers didn't sit right with him as Tian Zhou had initially caused plenty of trouble for him back then in the Tianqin compound. "If you don't wish to die, then it would be best for you 2 to shut your mouths." Jianchen slowly stood up as he stared coldly at the men in front of him. "Fuck, kid. The beauty and us 2 are talking, since when was it your turn to interfere?" Death won't come easy for you. The second brother glared at Jian Chen dangerously. While Jian Chen had a decent friendship with the young Lord Qin Shao who was within the same clan as Tian Zhou, they were the brothers of Tian Zhou and knew that Jian Chen was not a person he liked. The previously silent Tian Zhou looked on with a dark expression. He had a look full of killing intent directed at Jian Chen. He had already a large amount of complaints about Jian Chen back in Walorant City and had even started a dispute. If it weren't for the Patriarch coming to stop the two, then he would have fought Jian Chen. Even in Mercenary City, he had wanted to hit Jian Chen many times but was held back due to the Grand Elder. However now, there was an opportunity sitting right in front of him. He would naturally not let this go by. Tian Zhou gave a knowing look at the blood-soaked man who instantly understood what Tian Zhou was getting at. Pointing at Jian Chen, he cried out loud, "Eldest brother, second brother, third brother. We were attacked by this heartless kid. This cruel youth wanted to kill our Tianqin clan's Qin Shao. The other clan's member and I were caught off guard when he struck and were injured severely. If it weren't for eldest brother coming here so fast, then I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to meet with you right now." Sniffing away his tears, the fourth brother began to moan out loud. Tian Zhou's face froze after the outburst as he glared at Jian Chen. "Youngster, you've twisted the kindness of my elder brother while holding the esteemed title of being an honored guest. How could you be so devoid of a conscience? Today, I, Tian Zhou, will not forgive you. Third eldest, go and capture the would-be murderer of our Qin Shao." In Tian Zhou's eyes, Jian Chen was only a great saint master and didn't bother to see him as a person worth capturing personally. "Yes, eldest brother." Immediately the third brother sprung into action and flew at Jian Chen with his saint weapon. From the start, he had never bothered to place this great saint master in sight. With a gleam of light, Jian Chen didn't bother to say anything since it would all be useless. "Stop." Suddenly, a weak-sounding voice could be heard as the blood-covered Qin Ju awoke when the people were all distracted. With a good amount of effort, he spoke out fragilely, "You misunderstand. We were attacked by an extremely strong Earth Saint Master who was unrelated to Brother Jian Chen." Tian Zhou's face turned ugly as he stared at Qin Ju. "What rubbish. Qin Ju, you must have hit your head. You, Qin Shao and fourth brother were clearly ambushed by Jian Chen. What other person is there?" Hearing that, Qin Ju's eyes flashed twice but went silent. He had only just woken up and didn't hear Tian Zhou's initial words, so he wasn't clear on the situation. He did know that Tian Zhou desperately wished to make life difficult for Jian Chen. But with his severe injuries, he couldn't even look out for himself, let alone muster up the strength to help Jian Chen. At this moment, the third eldest had already reached Jian Chen and sneered right in front of his handsome, white face. With a single movement, his arm reached out to grab Jian Chen's shoulder with a strength that would shatter even the bones of a great saint master. Jian Chen's eyes flashed dangerously as the light wind sword appeared in his right hand. The light wind sword had already stopped right next to the man's throat before the third eldest could react. This sudden development caused the man to become shocked. Even the arm that was going to grab at Jian Chen's shoulder instantly stopped as he stood completely still. "Why, the third eldest kept staring at the sword at his throat in pure speechlessness as his shock caused him to begin to stutter. A single, great saint master, had unexpectedly been able to bring his saint weapon up to his neck without him noticing. For an Earth Saint Master, this was something he was completely shocked to realize. "You've managed to turn black into white with this situation. Do not blame me for being impolite." Jian Chen glared icily at Tian Zhou as he spoke. Having been threatened by the younger generation, this made Tian Zhou's face go dark. "Forward. Kill him and save third brother." With that, Tian Zhou withdrew his red-colored sword and charged toward Jian Chen. Taking out his own saint weapon, the second brother charged toward Jian Chen as well. At the same time, the third brother that was held hostage against Jian Chen's sword immediately took advantage of the shift of focus from him to Tian Zhou and the other two. With a swift movement, his hands flew at Jian Chen's throat in an instant. With a look of disdain and a sneer, Jian Chen pulled sharply on the sword on the third brother's neck. In an instant, his head separated from his body as a fountain of blood splurted from his neck and dyed the ground below them with his blood. Third eldest. Third eldest. Third brother. Tianzhou and the others cried out in fury and grievance. You bastard. I'll definitely kill you today. For vengeance. Tianzhou and the others roared in anger as they glared at Jianchen with eyes that could start fires as if they wanted to destroy Jianchen. Whoosh! Suddenly, another whistling sound could be heard as a golden ray of light came from behind Jianchen. In an instant, the lightning-like bolt of light speared through the second brother's chest. Right where the heart should be, only a hole could be seen. Even after striking through the second brother's chest, the arrow didn't lose speed at all and traveled another 100 meters before smashing into the side of a mountain slope and disappearing from view. Jianchen turned his head to look only to see the icy cold visage of the yellow-clothed girl. In her hands was the golden lunar bow with the bowstring looking as if it had just been twanged. The second eldest was the one that had first insulted her, and with the girl's personality, there was no way for her to forgive him at all. If the third brother hadn't been killed by Jianchen, then she would have killed him as well. The second eldest's eyes opened wide as he looked at the golden longbow and the girl wielding it in disbelief. He had never thought that a young and weak-looking girl like her would possess such a terrifying amount of fighting strength. That golden arrow had traveled at a speed far beyond what he could detect. Bang! The second eldest's body fell to the ground, dead. After being killed by this weak-looking young girl, he would never be at ease even in death. Seeing his second brother fall dead, Tianzhou's face grew alarmed before instantly turning white. Both Jianchen and this young girl's fighting strength had far exceeded what he had expected. The second and third brother both had a strength that wasn't too far away from his own, but they both had been instantly killed. The most terrifying thing was the arrow that the yellow-clothed girl shot out. They left him in a state of terror. If it had been him that was shot at, there would have been no time for him to dodge since they were so close. He would have met the same fate as his second brother. Tianzhou immediately halted his forward momentum toward Jianchen. With this sudden change in development, he was suddenly stuck in a problematic dilemma. Jianchen turned to look at Tianzhou with an attentive gaze and taunted, "Were you not saying that you were going to kill me? Just why haven't you done anything yet then?" Hearing this, Tianzhou's face grew unsightly as he stared at the two with a venomous look. "Brat, Tianzhou, won't forget this day." With that, Tianzhou flew in the opposite direction to flee. Immediately pulling at her bow, the girl was just about to shoot at the fleeing Tianzhou when Jianchen disappeared from his original position and flew toward Tianzhou. Halfway to him, Jianchen's sword flashed in the light as a concentrated amount of sword qi flew at Tianzhou. Feeling something peculiar chase after him, Tianzhou flew to the side and simultaneously used his Fire Saint Force enhanced sword to smash at the sword qi he couldn't avoid. With this delay, his traveling speed was much slower than before and so Jianchen had quickly caught up to him before stabbing at him without hesitation. After being blocked from his escape path, Tianzhou could do nothing else but fight Jianchen. With his Saint Force exploding out from his body, the pressure around them began to escalate as the grass below them began to wither away. "Ha!" Tianzhou shouted. With a heavy swing, his giant sword came raining down on Jianchen. Without fear, Jianchen slammed his own sword qi-enhanced light wind sword against the other. Then, with a shake of his hand, the light wind sword slapped the sword, sending the giant sword flying to the side. With a strong amount of power, the sword immediately stabbed deep Tianzhou's chest before the tip came exiting out from his back. You are an Earth Saint Master? How?" At that moment, Tianzhou had been brought to full clarity. The person he had never bothered to look at was not a great Saint Master, but an Earth Saint Master. "It's no wonder. No wonder at all that you were able to kill third brother and chase up to me." Tianzhou's face ashened as he began to feel a great amount of regret. If he had known earlier that Jianchen was an Earth Saint Master, then he wouldn't have tried to provoke him. How unfortunate, you learned of this too late. Jian Chen stated emotionlessly as his killing intent went undisguised. Chapter 305. Seeing the ruler armament once more, Tian Zhou stared at Jian Chen with a dangerous gleam. Do you mean to kill me? Jian Chen laughed. This is the consequence of your actions. It was you that started all of this and decided that I was in the wrong, and then you wanted to kill me. Do not blame me for returning the favor. With that, Jian Chen slowly pulled the sword out from Tian Zhou's chest, causing a river of blood to come pouring out. Jian Chen's sword had only pierced through Tian Zhou's chest 2 inches away from his heart. While it had run through the chest, it wasn't a life-threatening injury for a man like him. Knowing that Jian Chen was determined to kill him, Tian Zhou threw away his cautionary attitude and with a serious shout, he roared, "If you wish to kill me, then be prepared to pay a heavy price." Tian Zhou's giant sword burst out with light as a fire-like essence began to coil around his sword. The temperature around the two immediately soared higher as even the grass below began to rapidly dry up. Go die then. Tian Zhou howled as his sword transformed into a flaming light that came roaring down at Jian Chen. He knew that as long as the strange, longbow-wielding girl was there, he had no chance to escape. No matter where he went, he would die, but he could hopefully drag Jian Chen down with him. Even if he couldn't kill Jian Chen, he would at least deal a significant amount of damage to him. Right now, there was only a month left until this part of the competition was over. That meant that this would be the most intense part of the competition. If he could injure Jian Chen at this crucial moment, then even an Earth Saint Master like Jian Chen wouldn't be able to leave this place without harm. With that single sword strike, a strong pressure flooded the area and pressed down on Jian Chen's body. With this sensation, Jian Chen felt as if he was stuck in a quagmire, and that his own movements had become restricted. Tian Zhou's sword was undoubtedly using a battle skill. Jian Chen sneered. He had seen plenty of battle skills, and had even experienced the taste of a tornado-like battle skill before, so a battle skill like this was nothing. Only if there was no alternative would Jian Chen try to go head-to-head against a battle skill. But he knew he generally didn't have enough power to go against one. Sliding forward, Jian Chen narrowly dodged the sword and swiftly shot his blade forward towards Tian Zhou's throat. Before Tian Zhou could even react, the light wind sword was against his neck. Even if you try your hardest, your fate won't change. You are not an opponent for me. Jian Chen laughed as he looked dangerously at Tian Zhou. Tian Zhou, since I am friends with the Tianqin clan, you may give me your final words. You truly dare to try and kill me? Tian Zhou roared with an angry look. After exchanging several blows, he had already figured out that he wasn't strong enough to fight Jian Chen. Even a battle skill wouldn't be enough to defeat this 20-year-old youth. Knowing that Jian Chen wasn't a great Saint Master was truly a fact that he found hard to believe. Jian Chen sneered, "Do you really think that just because you are a member of the Tianqin clan, I won't make a move against you? I've already shown enough restraint. If you kill me, the Tianqin clan won't let you go." Tian Zhou began to show a sliver of fear. Jian Chen's glare dimmed as he shook his hand, causing the light wind sword to strike Tian Zhou's face with a slap. The sharp edge of the sword cut slightly into the man's face and drew blood. You! Tian Zhou grew indignant as he glared furiously at Jian Chen, yet he made no move to attack him. If looks could kill, then Jian Chen would have been burned to ashes by Tian Zhou's malicious glower. Humiliation. This was the biggest humiliation Tian Zhou had ever felt. As a direct member of the Tianqin clan, Tian Zhou held a clear, decisive role of power and status. Even Qin Shao couldn't compare to his status. But Jian Chen's actions had been nothing better than a slap to his face with his palm. This act alone had almost caused Tian Zhou to explode in anger. What about me? So what if I kill you? Don't even bother to threaten me with the Tianqin clan. You are not the representative of the Tianqin clan, and if it weren't for the sake of brother Qin Shao, then I would have taught you a lesson back at the Tianqin clan's compound. Jian Chen stated. With a fierce glare, he kicked Tian Zhou in the chest. However, whether it was accidental or intentional, Jian Shen had kicked him where Tian Zhou had been stabbed with the sword earlier. Tian Zhou stifled a groan as he was sent flying 5 or 6 meters into the air before finally crashing back down to the ground. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, his face went as white as parchment as his chest began to flow with blood again. Jian Shen brought out his light wind sword in a flash once more before stabbing at Tian Zhou's throat with a terrifying amount of sword qi. Just as he stabbed down at him, a weak-sounding voice came from behind. Jian Shen, please, don't kill him. In the end, he's my uncle. Qin Shao had somehow awoken during their fight, and had struggled to get to where Jian Shen was, his voice a barely audible whisper. Jian Shen's light wind sword suddenly stopped right in front of Tian Zhou's face, the chilling feel of the sword qi already close enough to touch Tian Zhou's body. There was no fear in his face. After several years of life or death fights, Tian Zhou was experienced with fatal events. Death had no effect on him. Biting his lips, Jian Shen stared at Tian Zhou like a starving wolf and growled, "For the sake of brother Qin Shao, I'll spare your life today." With that, Jian Shen recollected his sword before looking at the space ring on Tian Zhou's finger. Jian Shen loftily grabbed the space ring and walked back to where Qin Shao was. Tian Zhou crawled up from the ground with a heavy look as he stared icily at Jian Shen's retreating back. Wordlessly, he tried to address the wound on his chest before walking away. His space ring had been taken, and he had been humiliated by Jian Shen, but there wasn't a single word he could say. Revenge could come later. As long as he lived, he would be able to find an opportunity to wipe out the unbelievable humiliation he had suffered today. The blood-soaked third brother stood behind Tian Zhou with a baleful glare as a large amount of killing intent radiated from him. Jian Shen stopped his movements as he turned his head to look at the third brother. "Who said you could leave?" With a slash of his sword, a burst of sword qi flew at the man. The third brother had already sustained heavy injuries that had taken up the majority of his strength. Thus, he was unable to dodge this blow and was speared through by the sword qi. The originally blood-soaked third brother fell to the ground slowly as more blood came pouring out of the thumb-sized hole in his throat. Tian Zhou shook slightly, but he continued to move away without stopping. Quickly, he disappeared past the mountain ridge. Jian Shen walked to Qin Zhao's side and inspected his wounds before taking the other 2 Radiant Saint Force-filled pills to feed him. "No, Jian Shen. 1 pill is enough, give the other one to brother Qin Zhu." Qin Shao blocked Jian Shen from feeding him another pill. Nodding his head, Jian Shen put 1 pill into Qin Zhao's mouth before turning to Qin Zhu and giving a pill to him as well. With a small amount of hesitation, Qin Zhu took the pill into his mouth before closing his eyes to heal. With his innate silence, he had no words to say. Jian Shen walked to where the yellow-clothed girl was and said, "Please look after these 2 for a moment, I'll go collect a few things from nearby." The girl looked at Jian Shen with a skewed look before turning her head angrily to the side without another word. Jian Shen didn't beat around the bush either, and instead looked around himself. Pushing the tips of toes on the ground, he immediately shot off like an arrow into a specific direction before quickly disappearing from sight. Seeing how Jian Shen had finally disappeared, the longbow-wielding girl pouted unhappily as her beautiful face held some anger. Jian Shen returned quickly with a bunch of wrist-sized branches. Setting them on the ground, Jian Shen took out a few piles of rope and some quilts and began to busy himself with them. In a flash, a simple stretcher was made for Qin Shao to lay in. Carefully placing Qin Shao in the stretcher, Jian Shen knew that Qin Zhao's waist had almost been cut in half, making it impossible to walk. Even standing would be tantamount to being impossible, so a stretcher would be needed. "Brother Jian Shen, I'm sorry to be such a bother." Qin Shao spoke out emotionally. Jian Shen's eyes narrowed. "Qin Shao, if I am your brother, then don't say such words." Qin Shao grabbed Jian Shen's hands without a word, but his heart was filled with emotions. Grabbing the stretcher, Jian Shen lifted him into the air so the stretcher was at his shoulders. Turning around to look at Qin Zhu, he asked, "Are you able to move still?" After Qin Zhu had eaten the pill with Radiant Saint Force, his body was in better condition than before. While he wasn't completely healed, it was better than nothing. With some effort, Qin Ju stood up and stared at Jian Chen with a complicated expression. "I've no problems, but I won't be able to fight. However, I'm capable of running. This isn't a good place to idle about, let's go," Jian Chen said. Neither the girl or Qin Ju had any objections to this, and so after taking the second, third, and fourth brothers' space belts, the four of them left the area. Bang! Suddenly, a loud sound could be heard as an equally large amount of energy was seen rippling through the air. Jian Chen and the others could even detect that the earth below them was vibrating slightly. Bang 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 bang. From far away, a loud sound and a large amount of energy could be seen and heard. Even the shaking of the earth continued despite the long distance, and had even cracked the ground slightly. Jian Chen and the others immediately stopped their movements and looked at a giant mountain several hundred meters away where they could barely make out the sight of what was happening. "There are people fighting over there, they seem quite strong." Jian Chen spoke with a solemn expression. As soon as he spoke, a giant, iron-like seal flew from the mountains before crashing down to the ground. Bang! With a mighty crash, the ground shook violently once more in a stronger surge than before, making it seem almost as if there was an earthquake. "That's the seal of Treasure Mountain," the girl cried out in shock. Her face grew solemn as she said, "Sure Xiangran has to be fighting with someone. Seeing how far back the seal of Treasure Mountain was sent flying, the enemy must be very strong, or else there has to be many of them." At that moment, the seal began to fly upwards back toward the mountain slope. Jian Chen and the other three could see that before the seal could come flying down, another figure flew up into the air with his flaming, scarlet sword smashing against the seal. Bang! Like a clap of thunder, the sound shook everyone's ears as they all saw a ripple of energy fly forth. The seal continued to wobble in midair as it flew back constantly. Ruler armament. That sword has to be a ruler armament for it to knock back the seal of Treasure Mountain so far back. The girl cried out in shock. Chapter 306. Get out. Jian Chen grew solemn the moment he saw the sight before saying, "It would be unwise to approach them now. Let's hurry up and leave." If he didn't have the injured Qin Shao draped over him, then he would have investigated the sight above. For the sake of Qin Shao, he would place safety as their priority. Jian Chen took the stretcher and led the girl away from the place as Tian Ju bit his lips and followed close behind. The ground began to shake once more as the mountains shook violently. Even the ground near Jian Chen's feet began to crack as the sounds of a fierce battle could be heard. His ears shook from the vibrations. A few of the more courageous men were attracted by the sight and flew toward the sounds of the battle. The vast majority of them had already lost their space belts and were heavily bandaged, while some looked quite miserable. The moment they saw the injured members behind Jian Chen, two of the more well-off looking men flew at Jian Chen in a hurry. The two were extremely fast and had traveled several hundred meters in a flash. Swiftly coming to a stop to measure Jian Chen and the others, they both noticed that Jian Chen and the other girl were no older than 25 years at the most. Their confidence couldn't help but go up as one of them shouted, "You there, stand still." With that, they closed the distance. Jian Chen's eyes flashed as the girl instantly grabbed at her longbow and shot 2 golden arrows from it. They traveled at an extremely fast pace. The 2 golden arrows traveled through the air with a golden trail as if they were shooting stars that flew closer and closer to the 2 men. When the 2 saw the girl take out her bow, they immediately took out their saint weapons as a precaution. As the golden arrows were shot, they were already waving their swords in an attempt to cut them down. Earth Saint Masters. Jian Chen's heart skipped a beat. From the pulse in their saint force, Jian Chen could tell just how strong the 2 were. Bang! Bang! Following 2 metallic sounds, the smoke from the explosions, created when dirt and grass was kicked into the air by the collisions, masked the 2 men from view. The 2 men then shot straight into the air as a result of the energy. They involuntarily spat out a mouthful of blood. While the girl was very young in age, she was very firm in her killing strikes, unlike those born and raised in a sheltered lifestyle. Just like a hardened battle veteran that has experienced countless of battles, she readily stepped forward as her dainty jade-like fingers stretched the bowstring on her bow. Slowly stretching it taut, she immediately let go and released a golden arrow away from her. Whoosh whoosh. Two twangs could be heard as the two golden arrows left a trail of golden light as they shot toward the two men. Before they could even react, the arrows had shot through their chests. Ah! The two men let out simultaneous cries of anguish as they felt a fist-sized hole punched through their chests. As the golden arrows pushed past their bodies, the remnants of the energy exploded within their body and instantly destroyed their inner organs. As soon as the men screamed in pain, they instantly went silent. The two of them were Earth Saint Masters, but they both had been easily killed by the girl and her longbow. Everyone around the area could see this fight clearly. Those who initially had thoughts about robbing Jian Chen and his group instantly withdrew all notions of fighting. Just who is that yellow-robed girl, and how strong is she? The two men who were after their tokens were Earth Saint Masters, but even they were easily killed by her. I can see that this girl isn't that old, but just how could she be that strong in such a young age? Whoever marries her in the future will be truly blessed. Shoo. Speak quietly, what if she hears you? If she gets angry, then it'll be all over for us once she starts shooting. That's right, a youngster like you should keep your mouth shut. A loose tongue may bring you trouble. Be careful with what you say, and for heaven's sakes, don't say anything unnecessary. From far away, three men began to talk among themselves. Looking at Jian Chen, no one dared come close to him. After that, barely any people dared to block Jian Chen and his group's path. Jian Chen continued to hold the stretcher in front of him while he rushed forward. After he had came across the two who blocked their path, he collected their belongings, a space ring and a nice-looking space belt. The girl watched as Jian Chen rifled through the men's belongings without saying a word. Strapping the longbow to her back, she followed Jian Chen from behind as they both left the place. Shi Xiangran continued to fight for a long period of time, allowing Jian Chen to travel several kilometers away. Even after hearing several explosions, Jian Chen and the group didn't turn back and continued on. 6 hours later, Jian Chen and his group were farther away now and finally stopped at a cave to rest. Within the dark cave, a small campfire could be seen burning. This cave has someone recently staying here, forget it, let's occupy it. Jian Chen muttered before carefully setting Qin Shao down on the ground. Collecting several untouched branches around the cave's opening, Jian Chen lit them on fire to use as a torch. The branches won't burn for long, you should all go inside to rest first, I'll go find some more branches. With that, Jian Chen turned to climb down the slope and collect some more branches and dried sticks. While Jian Chen continued to collect branches, the sounds of footsteps could be heard. Ignoring the sound, Jian Chen continued to collect the tree branches on the ground. Quickly, two shadows flew into view. From their appearances, the two were around 40 years old. One was quite sturdy in stature and wore a black sleeveless gown. Both of his dark-skinned arms bulged with muscles and he wore blue-colored trousers with clothed shoes. The other man was quite even in his build and was not tall at all. His face was rather suited to talk to the crowd, but his ordinary-looking eyes shone with light. He wore a white robe that was quite damaged and there were green stains from the grass nearby. As Jian Chen measured the two, they looked at Jian Chen in return. Realizing that Jian Chen was no older than 20 years old, the two men both dropped their guards. Jian Chen looked at the two for a moment longer before he resumed picking up branches from the ground. With a single strand of rope, he tied a bundle of sticks together before putting them in his space ring. Now that Jian Chen was an Earth Saint Master, he had no reason to hide his space ring anymore. His strength was sufficient enough to protect himself, so the space ring he had originally hidden in the Tianqin clan was now worn proudly on his hand. When the middle-aged man saw the space ring on his hand, a barely detectable glint of light flashed through his eyes, but his expression remained impassive. The sturdy man took out a wine gourd and began to take a large gulp from it before sighing carefully. Then looking at Jian Chen, he said, fellow brother, you sure are quite brave. With a young and brazen kid like you participating in the gathering of the mercenaries, I truly admire you. Just what are you gathering up branches for? Jianchen tilted his head to look at the man. He looked simple and honest enough with those clear eyes. I'm using them to start a fire. Jianchen replied. As soon as all the branches were collected and bundled, Jianchen stored them into his space ring and quickly left without a look back. As the sturdy-looking man stood where he had been talking to Jianchen and looked at him run farther away from them before slowly saying, "That kid is quite mysterious." Even I think he is quite mysterious too. For a kid this young to participate, he's stronger than me when I was his age. What an admirable achievement. His companion laughed. The man then revealed the tiniest of sneers. Seniorin, did you see that on his person? That ring on his finger was actually a space ring? A space ring. The sturdy man gasped with a bitter smile before scratching at his bald head in embarrassment. I wasn't paying attention at all. Yunzheng, I could detect that kid was stronger than me several times over. Despite him having a space ring, a simple space belt is well enough for a person's everyday use. As long as one prepares one in advance, then they will save themselves some money. The middle-aged man didn't say anything and continued to look in the direction Jianchen ran in. After a little while he left in another direction with the other man. Jianchen quickly returned to the original cave and immediately took out the branches from within his space ring to begin the campfire. With Qin Zhao's heavy injuries, mobility was severely restricted, so Jianchen had calculated that they would have to stay within the cave for half a month and wait for Qin Zhao's condition to at least stabilize. For that reason, he had stockpiled a large amount of branches that filled a corner of the cave with a pile of wrist-sized sticks. Adding a few more sticks to the fire, Jianchen continued to take out some medicinal herbs from Qin Zhao's space belt to treat his wounds and then wrapped some bandages over them. At the same time, the equally injured Qin Zhu had taken out a few medicinal pills to swallow before sitting in a meditative state as he closed his eyes to allow his body to concentrate on healing. The girl sat on a rock in a corner of the cave as she gently stroked her golden longbow with a concentrated expression. The entire cave was rather peaceful and only the sounds of the crackling fire could be heard. At that moment, the sounds of footsteps could be heard walking into the cave, causing Jianchen, who was tending to Qin Zhao's wounds, to instantly stop his movements and look toward the entrance. He was already prepared to fight, although Qin Zhao was in a better state than before, he was in no state to fight at all. With his waist damaged, he was unable to exert much force, so Jianchen would have to protect him. The girl slowly raised her head as she stared at the cave's entrance as well while clenching the longbow in her hand. Although there weren't many that could challenge her, after seeing Shi Xiangran and the other user with a ruler armament, the two of them were equally paranoid and vigilant. In a flash, two figures entered Jianchen's eyesight. With the light from the campfire, Jianchen could see the appearances of the two men. One wore a black sleeveless gown and was quite sturdy in stature that revealed his dark-skinned and muscular arms. The middle-aged man behind him was well distributed in build. They were the two that Jianchen had seen when he was collecting branches earlier. Get out. The girl commanded coldly at the two. Chapter 307. Being bold. As the two men saw the girl speak, the sturdy-looking man took a look at the beautiful face of hers and immediately stopped right where he stood. Quickly regaining his awareness, he spoke with a depressed expression, "The miss is quite lively. I've traveled for 30 years and yet I've never seen such a vivid woman before. Just what might be your name? I discovered this cave personally and coincidentally someone came in when I just left it. Even then, you are asking me to leave when it should really be you." Then, the man looked around the cave only to quickly discover that one of the people there was the one they had seen not too long ago, Jianchen. When he saw him, he broke out into a smile. "How coincidental, fellow brother, we've found each other once again." Jianchen looked at both the middle-aged man and the sturdy-looking man with a sharp stare only to discover that the both of them were Earth Saint Masters. While those who could make the breakthrough from the Great Saint Master realm to the Earth Saint Master realm was only 10%, those who could become an Earth Saint Master before the age of 50 was a 1% chance. Several 100,000 men were participating in this competition, and only a small number of them, that wouldn't exceed the triple digits, would be an Earth Saint Master. Now this part of the competition was finally reaching a conclusion. By this point, the remaining few people that were completely intact were almost all Earth Saint Masters, while a small minority were Great Saint Masters. So it was very rare that two Great Saint Masters would suddenly appear as they did right in front of Jian Chen. Without even waiting for Jian Chen's response, the sturdy man walked over to the side of the caves and sat down with a smile. "Fellow brother, since you have two injured men with you, I won't drive you out. We should all protect each other after all. Since everyone should be lively right now, let's talk about something, don't you think so, Yunzheng?" The sturdy man asked the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man gave a small smile before saying, "Signorin is correct. If no one has any objections, then we should all rest. If we come across any piece of trouble, then we can help each other out. After all, the more people the stronger we are." The middle-aged man sat down next to the burly man and began to look at the four people in front of him. The girl continued to maintain her icy facade as she stared at the two men dangerously. Despite the looks of goodwill on their faces, she didn't plan on dropping her guard. Looking at the girl, Jian Chen hesitated for a moment before nodding his head. "That's fine. We'll share this cave for now, but remember this. If someone dares to harm us in any way, then do not blame me for being impolite." With that, Jian Chen's eyes frosted over as a dangerous gleam entered them when he said his last sentence. Hearing this, the middle-aged man to the side of the burly one grew uncomfortable for a moment. For a Grand Earth Saint Master like him be threatened by a 20-year-old child, that didn't seem right. With it as is, the man could conclude that Jian Chen wasn't an ordinary person. For a person to remain with their space belt for this long in an intense massacre of a competition without any major injuries was commendable. To also look at the two of them with such an arrogant expression, this was someone a person could rely on. The man didn't seem to hear Jian Chen's threat and began to laugh. "I am called Signorin, the man to my side is called Yunzheng. Fellow brother, what is your name?" Seeing the simple and straightforward manner of the burly man, Jian Chen immediately concluded that this man was honest. These type of people normally had no machinations hidden away within them, and even if they had, they wouldn't act upon them. Memories from long ago were suddenly recalled back into his mind as Jian Chen thought about his eldest brother Changyang Hu and Tai Ta from Kargath Academy. These two were very similar to the Signorin in front of him. Because of this, Jian Chen's impression of him was decent. "I am called Jian Chen." Jian Chen spoke with a friendly smile at Signorin. The girl who was sitting on a rock stared at the smiling Jian Chen with a complex look. Not too long after, the cold hard look on her face receded away and was replaced with a rarely seen gentle look. Because of his genes and his cultivation methods, Jian Chen's appearance was exceptionally handsome and could even be said to be perfect. His smile could stun anyone, and there was not a single girl under the heavens that could resist. Even the girl not too far away from him had been dazed a bit. Quickly, she recovered herself and tore her eyes away from Jian Chen to look elsewhere. "Jian Chen, I can see that you are quite young, perhaps not even 25 years old." Signorin asked. Jian Chen gave a small smile but didn't respond to him. Signorin looked toward the yellow-clothed girl and continued to ask, "Little girl, you've grown to be quite beautiful, even I've grown quite astounded. What is your name?" With a snort, the girl turned away from him and leaned against the wall to look at the dusky cave roof. With an embarrassed laugh, the burly man turned to Jian Chen for help. "Signorin, don't bother, her temper is quite bad," Jian Chen smiled. Even he didn't know the girl's name other than the time when Shi Xiangran had called out to her as Luan Air. Hearing Jian Chen's words, the girl immediately whirled around with a furious expression. "You're the one with a bad temper." Signorin stealthily took a look at the girl with a hand scratching his nose and thought to himself, "It seems Jian Chen is correct. While this girl is quite lively, her temper is equally large. This isn't a person we should offend." Jian Chen's eyes narrowed as he looked on with a displeased expression. Then, he took out a few space belts with dried blood and a space ring. "Whoa, Jian Chen, you've so many space belts. There's even blood on some of them. Did you steal those? Senior looked at Jian Chen with a look of shock and his mouth wide open. Even Yunzheng, who was sitting right next to Senior, looked at Jian Chen with some shock and a strange look in his eyes. Jian Chen laughed at Senior An's words and replied, "Is it considered stealing if they tried first?" Under the amazed eyes of Senior An and Yunzheng, Jian Chen began to take out and classify the items within the space belt and space ring. In total, there were 4 purple cards, 3 Class 5 Monster Cores, 200 Class 4 Monster Cores, 500 Class 3 Monster Cores. There was a small mountain of money that shined with purple, gold, and even silver lights. There was also a small pile of around 400 tokens lying about. Seeing the pile of black-colored tokens, Senior An's eyes immediately zoomed in on it and nearly began to drool as he muttered, "Wah, there's so many tokens." Even Yunzheng had been moved by such a sight as his heart began to beat wildly. Jian Chen didn't lift his head up from the pile and began to divide the items into 2 smaller piles. Storing them within a space belt, he handed them to the girl and said, "Take it, these are yours." The girl stared fiercely at Jian Chen as she took the 200 tokens from within the space belt into her own. Then, she threw the space belt back at Jian Chen and said, "The other things in here are of no value to me." Without any more objections, Jian Chen took the remaining items into his own space belt. The 2 purple cards, 2 Class 5 Monster Cores, 100 Class 4 Monster Cores, and the pile of money, he didn't think that the girl would be so rich that she would disregard this wealth of items. Senior An stared at the space belt thrown at Jian Chen with some disbelief and swallowed the saliva building up in his throat with some difficulty. Turning to look at the handsome Jian Chen, his bald head thumped against the walls of the cave continuously in regret. Why couldn't I have been born a few years later? Ah! Why couldn't I have been born handsome? I've only just figured it out. If one is born handsome and popular, even the beautiful women will take the initiative to give the good items to you. Senior An continued to mutter to himself as if no one was around. The girl sitting on top of the rock began to heave up and down in anger while trying to pretend to ignore the man. But her eyes continued to shoot fire as she stared maliciously at him. Sitting right next to Senior An, Yunzheng looked at Jian Chen and the girl with a sluggish look. Seeing how the girl acted shocked his heart. 2 purple cards, 2 Class 5 Monster Cores, 100 Class 4 Monster Cores and a large sum of money was not an easy thing to give away. This sight was far too much for him. The items in that space belt were an abundant amount of wealth and would even tempt an Earth Saint Master. It would appear that despite the age of these two, they are not people of ordinary status. To be able to toss around a Class 5 Monster Core, they must belong to powerful people and hold powerful positions. The man thought to himself. Chapter 308, Yunzheng's shock. Time flew by. Jian Chen and the group of people camped in the cave for 7 days. In that time, Jian Chen, Senior An, and Yunzheng continued to talk among each other in a good-natured manner. The yellowed-clothed girl rarely spoke. Even now, Jian Chen still didn't know her name. Qin Zhao's injuries continued to slowly heal, and while the cut mark on his waist wasn't completely healed, a small scab was already forming. With the help of some medicine, another 10 days would be needed before he could walk. Even Qin Zhu's injuries had healed sufficiently enough for him to fight. With his valiant strength, it would take another few days for him to heal completely. Within the dark cave, the fire that had been burning incessantly danced slowly. By the side, the sitting Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes and looked around the room. Qin Zhu, the girl, and Senior An were all sitting in a meditative position and Qin Shao was still laying on the stretcher with his eyes closed in a sleeping position. Only Yunzheng was not in the cave. Jian Chen restoked the flames before walking out of the caves. A while after he had left, the yellow-clothed girl opened her eyes from her meditative position and scoured the place. Then, closing her eyes, she went still again. Arriving at the cave's entrance, Jian Chen began to take in the fresh air of the outside world before closing his eyes in a pleased manner. The ventilation within the cave wasn't the best, and the stuffy, hot air within the cave caused everyone inside to feel uncomfortable. Taking in another deep breath, he climbed down the mountain slope to wander about. Since he had to protect Qin Shao, Jian Chen didn't dare go far. Until Qin Shao was fully healed, Jian Chen didn't plan on leaving this place. If they were to travel with an immobile Qin Shao and came across a strong individual, then it would be very problematic. Even if he wasn't afraid for himself, but if the target was Qin Shao, Jian Chen would be stuck in a problematic situation. In this short amount of time, Jian Chen had collected a total of at least 1,000 tokens. The competition had only required a total of 500 tokens in order to pass, so Jian Chen was well above what was needed. The only thing left for him to do was survive for the rest of the time limit. Jian Chen leaped into a 30-meter tall tree and sat on top of a tree branch. Laying down on it, his head continued to think about the Ming Dong who was still within the hidden shrine. I wonder how Ming Dong is doing. His ancestor was good friends with the Shrine Lord. He will definitely help out Ming Dong. When I see him again, he'll definitely be vastly different. This gathering of the mercenaries is the easiest way to obtain a heaven-tier battle skill. As long as I try my hardest, then I will definitely obtain it. When I am strong enough, I will be able to return to the Jesson Kingdom and settle my debt with the Huayan sect. With a heaven-tier battle skill, the Changyang clan will definitely increase in power as well. Muttering to himself, Jian Chen continued to lay about on the tree as he stared up with a determined look. Shortly after, Jian Chen let out a breath of air with a worried look. The Jesson Kingdom is currently in a bad situation. The neighboring 4 kingdoms are uniting against them. Within 2 years, there will definitely be a war between the two sides. Before that happens, I must increase my strength as much as possible and be of some help. As Jian Chen continued to plan for the future on top of his tree branch, the shadows of 3 men quickly flew toward his direction with the speed of an arrow. From the 3 men, the frontmost person was especially pale and drenched with blood. His originally white robes were heavily stained with blood as the 2 men behind him chased him with their saint weapons ready to strike. Sensing the 3 men, Jian Chen pushed aside the foliage in order to see just what was happening from his overhead perch. Just as he looked at the 3 men, he revealed a surprised look before smiling. I didn't think that he would be chased in such a manner. It seems that he plans to bring them back to our campground. With that, Jian Chen leaped down from his tree branch and stood right next to a tree in front of the 3 men. From the 3 men, the person running away was the same person from the caves, Yunzheng. At this moment, Yunzheng was in a miserable state and had long since lost his svelte attitude. The moment Yunzheng noticed Jian Chen, an indescribable light flashed in his eyes before increasing his speed a bit. Flying toward Jian Chen, the pale Yunzheng began to breathe heavily as he took refuge behind him. Brother Jian Chen. Let's hurry up and run. These 2 men are too strong, let's go and get Senior to help deal with them. Jian Chen shook his head with a smile. My brother is currently resting inside, I don't wish to shock him. But, Yunzheng held some reluctance in his face, but he said no more after that as Jian Chen held his hand up. I'll deal with this matter here. Hearing Jian Chen's calm attitude, Yunzheng slowly began to calm himself down before standing quietly behind Jian Chen. He wanted to see just how strong of an Earth Saint Master Jian Chen was. The 2 men chasing after Yunzheng came to a stop several meters away from Jian Chen. The 2 looked to be around 40 years old and both wore blue robes that did nothing to hide their bulging muscles. One of the men was quite short and looked to be around 5 feet tall with dark skin as black as coal. The other man was rather skinny looking and had an average appearance with a bent nose. On the left side of his face there were several intersecting scars that destroyed his face. His face was rather terrifying to look at, but it also increased his intimidation factor. The 2 men sized up Jian Chen as they looked at him. Giving each other a small look, one of the 2 immediately walked up to Jian Chen before pushing him out of the way. Jian Chen wrapped his hands against his chest before smiling at the 2 fellow brothers. What might you 2 be doing? Seeing the expression on Jian Chen's face, the short one began to feel annoyed at him. Without another thought, he glowered at both Jian Chen and Yunzheng. If you know what's good for you, hand over your space belt at once or else, Or else what? Jian Chen continued to smile. The short one glared at Jian Chen with an even more cruel stare before roaring, "Or else you too will die here today." In an instant, Jian Chen released a large amount of killing intent. "Is that so? Then allow me to send you on your way." With that, Jian Chen disappeared from view before reappearing in front of the short man. At the same time, his light wind sword immediately came into view before the chilling cold sword Qi stabbed at the short man with blinding speed. The short man hadn't expected for Jian Chen to make such a sudden move so quickly. Before he could even react or dodge the sword strike, the silver sword had already stabbed straight through his throat. Jian Chen's sword was far too fast. In an instant, the short man had been caught off guard and killed. Even as an Earth Saint Master, it was still impossible for him to dodge Jian Chen's strike. Without stopping, Jian Chen immediately pulled out his bloody sword from the short man's throat before disappearing from view once more. In an instant, his sword flashed as it flew at the other Earth Saint Master. At that moment, the Earth Saint Master hadn't reacted yet as he stared in horror at the incoming Jian Chen. Then, it was with a serious look that he had realized this youth he had disregarded earlier was in fact a tiger wearing a sheepskin. "Ha!" The man roared as his saint force exploded out of his body. The saint weapon in his hand began to flood with a blue-colored light as he slashed at Jian Chen. Jian Chen's figure blurred as he dodged the other man's sword. His light wind sword became a silver glow of light that flew at his throat. Reacting quickly, the man tilted his head to dodge Jian Chen's strike and allowed the sword to slip past him. However, the sword swept past his neck and a small cut appeared on his throat. As the man was starting to rejoice, he suddenly felt a stinging sensation on his neck. Before he could even look down and see what happened, his head was immediately cut off. It spun through the air before falling back down to the ground as his headless body fell to the ground with blood flying everywhere. These two men were strong enough to force an Earth Saint Master like Yunjing to flee, but in an instant, they had been killed in a single strike by Jian Chen. That made Yunjing open his eyes wide in disbelief and shock at what had just happened. This type of strength, was this really something a 20-year-old youth should be able to possess? Standing to the side of Jian Chen, Yunjing tried to breathe in and out in order to calm himself. Although he knew that Jian Chen was already an extremely terrifying Earth Saint Master, he didn't think that the two men that were chasing after him would be dealt with in a single strike. Despite this fight happening right in front of his eyes, Yunjing still couldn't believe it and thought he was dreaming. This was an illusion and not reality. It completely toppled over what he knew as true. As a traveler in the continent who had painfully cultivated for 30 to 40 years before finally making a breakthrough to become an Earth Saint Master before the age of 50, this was already an achievement that could be considered to be a genius. Those who became an Earth Saint Master before the age of 50 were all well-known experts and geniuses of cultivation with a bright future. Right now, two Earth Saint Masters were killed by a youth that wasn't even 25 years old. This was a massive blow to Yunjing, and as such, this was the very first time that he had felt that this world was truly unfair and absurd. Chapter 309, Immortal's Cave. After dealing with the two men, Jian Chen collected the space belts of both Earth Saint Masters. Turning their bodies aside, Jian Chen didn't see anything else of value on their bodies. While these two were Earth Saint Masters, aside from their robes and space belts, there wasn't any space rings to be seen. Space rings were treasures within the Tianyuan continent that were symbols of status and power. Although Earth Saint Masters were qualified to have a space ring, not all of them had one. Jian Chen looked at the bloody Yunjing and spoke to him, "Let us go back and treat your injuries. Walking out here with injuries isn't a safe thing to do." The two then left the area. Yunjing watched the slowly disappearing back of Jian Chen with some remaining shock. Before he had even blinked, Jian Chen had killed two Earth Saint Masters. Something like this would give him an everlasting impression of Jian Chen. Could he be one of the rumored geniuses? Yunjing sighed before running to catch up with the receding figure of Jian Chen. The two figures returned to the cave where the bloody figure of Yunjing attracted the attention of everyone. The one friendliest to Yunjing, Seniorin, stood straight up with a furious expression. Yunzheng, what bastard did this to you? Tell me, and I'll go tear them limb from limb. Seeing just how concerned Signorin was, Yunzheng smiled faintly. I had some bad luck. When I was hunting, I came across 2 Earth Saint Masters. But fortunately, brother Jian Chen came along and killed them both. Hearing Yunzheng, Qin Shao, who was lying nearby, stared at Jian Chen with a surprised look before turning suspicious and doubtful at Yunzheng's words. Jian Chen, is what he says true? You were able to take down 2 Earth Saint Masters by yourself? Qin Shao spoke with an expecting tone. Sitting nearby, Qin Zhu's ears shook slightly, but his eyes didn't open. Jian Chen nodded his head, but gave no response. Qin Shao took on a pleasantly surprised look as he spoke with some excitement. Jian Chen, just how did you grow to become so amazing in such a short amount of time? When we first initially fought, I knew that you were already amazing, but I didn't think that you would be able to kill an Earth Saint Master so easily. That is because during the time I left the Tianqin clan, I managed to make a breakthrough to become an Earth Saint Master. Jian Chen replied. Hearing that, Qin Zhu's eyes snapped open as he looked at Jian Chen with shock. Even as his eyes opened, he remained as still as a statue. So it was like this, Qin Shao spoke with some understanding. Time went by in a flash. Soon there was only half a month remaining in the competition. In that time, Jian Chen had rarely ventured out and spent the majority of his time within the cave and silently protected Qin Shao. The yellow-clothed girl had used her Lunar Bao to make a new cave for her to privately cultivate. Signorin and Yunzheng both constantly walked outside and came back to the cave with bruised bodies the majority of the time. A few of the times, they had been chased down by several strong Earth Saint Masters back home, where Jian Chen would promptly deal with them. The power that Jian Chen would constantly display always reminded Signorin and Yunzheng of his strength. Those of the same cycle were miles away from Jian Chen's level. Second and third cycle Earth Saint Masters were not an opponent for Jian Chen at all. Not too long after, Jian Chen had unconsciously become the pillar for Yunzheng and Signorin. After several more days, Qin Zhao's body had been completely healed. Almost as if he had provoked Jian Chen's ire, Qin Shao immediately set himself about to cultivate as soon as he was healed with the assistance of monster cores in order to reach the Earth Saint Master realm as soon as possible. As for Qin Zhu, who had healed even earlier, it was almost as if he cherished words like gold. Ever since he had met Jian Chen up until now, he had never said more than 10 words total. This had made him even more quiet than Katafei back in Wake City. In the quiet cave, only the sounds of the crackling fire could be heard inside as the light constantly flickered. Jian Chen sat in a meditative position in a corner of the cave with a Class 5 monster core in his hand in order to absorb it. With the Jessen Kingdom on the verge of danger and the Changyang clan as well, he had to hurry up and increase his strength. There was no time to squabble around and waste time. Within the dark cave, everyone was cultivating, causing the leaking energy from the monster cores to gather within the cave. It was as if the cave was originally filled with this energy and was paradise for cultivators. At this time, the sounds of rapid footsteps could be heard. Jian Chen's ears shook slightly from the sound, but he made no movements to get up from his position. The footsteps grew closer as Signorin and Yunzheng both entered. Jian Chen, I've news, good news. I've heard from someone on the outside that there is a cave to the south of the forest that used to have a senior cultivator in it. There's treasure inside, and I'm willing to bet there's at least 1 heaven-tier battle skill. Signorin spoke out hurriedly. The moment Jian Chen heard the words, heaven-tier battle skill, he instantly snapped open his eyes. Although everyone was cultivating within the cave, in this sort of condition, they remained vigilant to the outside world. Not even the subtle and sudden gust of wind would be able to escape their notice. Qin Zhao's eyes widened as he said, heaven-tier battle skill? Are you sure that's right? What if some enemy was trying to announce false news and later set up a huge trap for everyone? Signorin shook his head, that I don't know. But many people are already heading on over there. I've heard that even the 5 experts are going there. 5 experts? What 5 experts? Qin Shao questioned. The 5 experts are men with a very well-known reputation and are also the strongest men around. In a short amount of time, practically everybody and everyone knows their names. Yunzheng spoke out to Jian Chen. While he knew Jian Chen was strong, he didn't know whether or not he was stronger than the 5 experts. Jian Chen's heart skipped a beat. Who are the 5 experts and what are their names? They are called Qin Ji, De Gufeng, Tian Muling, Shi Xiangran and Jieda Wukong. TL note, Qin Ji is not from the Tianqin clan. Jian Chen narrowed his eyes slightly at the mention of one of the names as he muttered, I've no idea that he would covet these treasures or even be called one of the 5 experts. Jian Chen, shall we go or stay? Qin Shao spoke, clearly showing that Jian Chen was the leader. Jian Chen hummed to himself before saying, we are going. Standing up, he spoke again, there's no time to waste, we have to go now. There's only 15 days of the competition remaining. Afterward, Jian Chen led Seniorin, Yunzheng, Qin Zhu and Qin Shao out of the cave while the longbow girl coincidentally flew out from her cave as well to follow. I've heard there is a heaven-tier battle skill in the southern caves. We're going to go investigate, do you want to come along? Jian Chen asked the girl. For a moment, the girl's eyes rested upon Jian Chen before nodding slightly without any more words. This time, we may come across our dear old friend, you should prepare yourself. Jian Chen said. With that, the 6 people flew out of the caves toward the south. On the way, Jian Chen noticed plenty of people rushing the south as well. With information about a heaven-tier battle skill being left behind in a senior cultivator's cave, every single person was rushing on over. These men were primarily great Saint Masters with a small bag to hold their possessions on their backs. Their space belts had long since been taken from them aside from a few sets of clothes and food. For these men without tokens, the Earth Saint Masters wouldn't bother them any longer unless there was some sort of deep grievances they had between each other. So these great Saint Masters could travel on the road without any major fears. Occasionally, there were several fights that broke out among foes, but those did not impede Jian Chen's group at all. Many of those who saw Jian Chen's group were quite smart. When they saw the colorful clothes and the space belts that swayed with their bodies every step, each one of them could guess that the people with Jian Chen were all extremely strong. They traveled for 5 days when Jian Chen and the group finally reached a dense forest. In this location, there were several groups of competitors that were all here to see if the information was accurate or not. I've heard that there are several extremely strong magical beasts guarding the cave. Even the 5 experts and around 30 Earth Saint Masters fought several times without a chance of success of entering the cave. That's right, I've heard there were several battles, and some of the Earth Saint Masters already died. Only 3 of the 5 experts still remain untouched. The magical beasts guarding the cave are too strong. If it goes on like this, then I'm afraid no one will be able to enter the cave before the time is up. Nothing is guaranteed just yet. Right now the secret of this place is already leaked. Haven't you seen the never-ending stream of people coming here? Just wait for the 5 experts to all assemble, then they'll be able to enter. Chapter 310, Gathering of the 5 Experts. 1. By the time Jian Chen had arrived, information of the cave had already propagated throughout the area. By now, Jian Chen could confirm that while there was no confirmation of a heaven-tier battle skill inside the cave, the very existence of the cave was real. Jian Chen didn't bother to step right in front of this crowd and immediately led his group past them and into the forest. Hearing the news from everyone else, Jian Chen had learned that the location of the Immortal's cave was in the depths of the forest. Because there had already been countless of people here, the forests had the obvious distinction of what directions people had traveled in. Jian Chen began to follow the popular path for another 4 hours before finally coming to a man-made spot of flattened ground. There were plenty of men gathered here. Around 300 men were formed in groups and several tents were scattered about. From the outside, one could see several men lying about within the tents to rest. All over the area, there were plenty of people sitting on the tree branches eating and drinking while others were resting. There were several Earth Saint Masters. A quick count estimated there to be below 40. There were several bandaged Great Saint Masters and only a few of them still had a space belt. The people in this area all seemed as if they had reached a peaceful agreement to not fight with each other or grab at their tokens. It was rather peaceful here with no one causing a disturbance. Let's go see what's up front. Jian Shen spoke to the people by his side as they moved forward. Jian Shen's group had attracted the attention of many people as everyone stared at their brightly dressed group. However, not a single person came to accost them. That was because the experts of the crowd could detect that this group had 3 Earth Saint Masters and thus saw no need to get into some sort of conflict. No one in this crowd wanted to offend a group with 3 Earth Saint Masters for no reason. Jian Shen and the group of 5 continued on when all of a sudden, they heard the animalistic sounds of a magical beast. Straight after the sound, an insanely strong amount of energy rippled through the air and caused the entire earth to tremble. The countless trees up ahead of Jian Shen could be seen slightly uprooting from the ground thanks to the energy before flying straight into the air. Ahead of them, several shadows of gargantuan beasts could be seen flying at full speed toward them with a heavy presence that made it difficult to breathe. Jian Shen's expression turned dark as he held out his hand to the people behind him. Get back, now. Without hesitation, the group flew backward in an attempt to return to the forest where the flat clearing was. Just as Jian Shen and his group ran back to the clearing, a group of tattered men followed behind Jian Shen from the direction of the magical beasts. There was a total of 12 men. Among the group, there was a 28-year-old youth that was similar to Ming Dong in age. This youth wore blue robes and carried a 2-meter-long fire-like sword that towered over his head. There were another 4 30-year-old men with rather handsome appearances. The rest were all 40 years old around with determined looks on their faces. Within this group, there were some people with blood dripping down their lips and had pale faces due to their injuries. This group of people had attracted the attention of everyone there. As 300 pairs of eyes landed on this group, everyone began to chatter among themselves. It seems this group lost again. AI, the guardians to the cave are too strong. Just how could the guardian magical beasts to the immortal cave be that easy to deal with? Without the 5 experts along with every single Earth Saint Masters combined together to deal with these magical beasts, then we would only just be wasting our energy. Just hold on, the magical beasts here are too strong. I can only guess that they are already at the Class 6 level. Only the combined power of the 5 experts would be enough to fight these magical beasts. How unfortunate, the 5 experts are all Earth Saint Masters. If we had a Heaven Saint Master, then entering the cave would have been easy. Seeing the youth with a long sword on his back, the girl's eyes gained a dangerous gleam as she spoke. That's a ruler armament. Jian Shen grew surprised as his eyes zoomed in on the fire sword on the youth's back before gradually turning serious. He was well familiar with a ruler armament now and knew that they originated from the remnants of a Saint Ruler Saint weapon. The remaining amount of energy within the weapons was enough to make a Heaven Saint Master shudder. However, a ruler's armament wasn't something anyone could use to their full extent. An Earth Saint Master was only able to use 1 or 2 parts of the ruler armament, but despite that, the power was still terrifying. As if remembering this fact, Jian Shen thought back to the fire sword as it gave off a bright red light that was strong enough to cause the seal of Treasure Mountain from Shixiangran to be sent flying back. That one battle between Shixiangran and this person had attracted the eyes of many people, but Jian Shen had never found out the conclusion to that fight. Could it be that this youth was the one that fought against Shixiangran? Jian Shen thought. The other dozen men walked back into their tents to rest, slowly disappearing from everyone's sight. The magical beasts up front are too strong. We'll have to wait for a moment longer and wait for more people to come before we can try again. Jian Shen said. Afterward, the 6 people all grabbed a tent from their space belts and began to set it up in a small circle close by. Hey, you there. Who gave you and your group permission to set up camp here? Hurry up and tear them down, hurry up and take them down. A 30-year-old man came into view and stared angrily at Jian Shen and the other 5. This man was rather skinny and wore a white robe. There was an arrogant look on his face which also had a single 3-claw scratch on it. Everyone turned to look at the noise as many of them began to smile at the misfortune of the group. This group surely doesn't know the rules of this place. Could it be that they didn't see how many people were afraid of setting up tents here? They were right to not do so. If everyone were to be able to set up their tents, then there wouldn't be any spot to have a tent at all. A man muttered as he drank from his wine gourd on a tree branch. They must be newcomers to this place and don't know the rules. Just why aren't they a bit smart? Did they not see how many people there are here but only a few tents? This isn't a place that just anyone could have a tent. Another man spoke up from his tree branch. The white-robed man immediately walked up to where Jian Chen's group was. The moment he saw that Jian Chen had no intention on tearing down their tents, his face distorted in anger as he shouted, "Did you not hear me? I said to tear your tents down, now." The man then kicked apart Qin Ju's tent before stomping toward Jian Chen's tent. With a kick, he attempted to tear down Jian Chen's tent. A flash of killing intent appeared in Jian Chen's eyes. In an instant, the light wind sword appeared in his hand as a silver-white light followed it. In an instant, the sword had slashed through the man's leg. Ah! The man let loose a howling sound in misery. The leg he had let loose to tear down Jian Chen's tent had instantly been cut off, causing blood to leak from the stump. Reabsorbing the sword, Jian Chen kicked the man's chest, causing him to fly 10 meters away into the air before falling to the ground and tumbling several steps violently. The fortitude of the man was evidently very weak as he began to scream out in pain continuously in a suffering manner. Those who had been watching with interest at first all stared at the 20-year-old youth with disbelief now. At this sight, the power displayed had been far more than what they had imagined. A purple-robed man with a resolute expression immediately came into the tent ground. He was one of the dozen men that had came back from the forest. When he saw the amputated leg of the man who was screaming on the ground, an unknown flash of light appeared in his eyes as he stared around the campgrounds. What happened here? The purple-robed man's voice was especially calm, making it seem as if he was only inquiring about the matter. At this moment, several of the tents opened up simultaneously. The men that appeared from the tents were all from the party that had ventured into the forest and were brought to the scene due to the screaming man. "Jia Caxi, who's the one that hurt you?" A horrified voice could be heard as a scarred middle-aged man came running forth like an arrow to the man with a furious face. "Big brother, it was him. He cut off my leg, my leg. Ah, my leg. Brother, you must help me kill him." The man pointed at Jian Chen with a furious look. The unbearable pain had already caused his face to distort. The scarred man looked at Jian Chen before standing up slowly. A 3-meter-long red spear appeared in his hands before quickly running toward Jian Chen without a single word. The spear danced with a fiery red glow as it flew toward Jian Chen. Jian Chen gained a cold look in his eyes as the light wind sword smashed against the spear. The collision caused a large shockwave of energy to fly out, crushing the surrounding 10 meters of vegetation into the ground. The people watching all retreated back several steps in order to allow the two people to settle their dispute. Chapter 311, Gathering of the Five Experts. 2. Jian Chen's sword struck out immediately as it left behind a single mirror image. Slowly, the mirror image turned into a dense net of mirror images that enshrouded the enemy. Several metallic clangs could be heard as the weapons struck against each other in a continuous motion, the energy scattering around the area and leaving a mess. This youth is quite strong if he's able to fight Zhigu to a standstill. The fire sword-wielding youth muttered under his breath with some shock. This youth is quite complex to be able to fight Zhigu on a scale like this without being put at a disadvantage. Geniuses are too scary. When he grows older, he will definitely be a person of major influence and power. "My lord, should we go rope him into our grace?" The purple-robed man asked the fire sword-wielding youth. The sword-wielder looked on with a flash of killing intent. With his strength, he'll definitely try to fight for the number 1 spot in the gathering of the mercenaries. He is a rival. With that, the purple-robed man understood the meaning of the youth's words and went quiet. On the other side, A youth around the age of 30 years old wore a white robe with golden linings. Both of his hands were wrapped up against his chest as he watched the two fight. It seems Jiedo Wukong's men have provoked a decent fighter. I didn't think he'd be so young though. That's right, that youth is quite decent if he's able to fight Zhigu to a standstill. If his strength was limited by just a small amount, it would be his defeat for sure. While Jiedo Wukong's strength isn't as good as Zhigu, with a ruler armament, he can only be matched up against others with a ruler armament. Otherwise, no one aside from a Heaven Saint Master would be an opponent for him. The white-robed man by his side said. It would seem that the youth will die here. When it comes to Jiedo Wukong's temper, absolutely no one in this world can escape from it after provoking him. That might not be the case here, Lord Qin Ji. Do you see that yellow-robed girl behind him? The man spoke with a smile. Hearing that, the one named Qin Ji turned to look at the girl. Unable to move his eyes away from the sight, he said, "What a stunning girl, her face is as cold as ice. Her eyes even give off a grim feeling, this is absolutely not a simple girl." The middle-aged man laughed and said, "Lord Qin Ji, do you see the golden longbow on her back?" Qin Ji immediately looked away from the girl and onto the longbow on her back. He said nothing after. The middle-aged man said, "I don't recognize what bow that is, but I can only assume it's not an ordinary one. It isn't her saint weapon because I can't detect any saint force from it. So, I can only guess that bow is actually a second uncle. Could it be that bow is a..." Qin Ji spoke with shock. "I don't dare confirm it." The man shook his head. First technique of the divine spear's 3 techniques, shadows of the spear. A voice cried out as the middle-aged man's spear began to fill the air with its shadow, stabbing toward Jian Chen. The shadows of the spear were numerous, making it difficult to tell which one was real and which one was fake. Each one of them were like the real one as it released a strong amount of pressure. This technique was almost parallel to Jian Chen's sword strikes. "That's an earth-tier battle skill." A person cried out. "An earth-tier battle skill? That's second to a heaven-tier battle skill. I didn't think I would be able to see one today. I've heard a heaven-tier battle skill was enough to change the winds of battle and even distort the world. Who knows what an earth-tier battle skill will be capable of?" Jian Chen let out a sneer as he closed his eyes. His right hand continued to blur as the sword in his hand covered the air with phantom images of the sword that rivaled the spears in numbers. Ding 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 ding. Following a series of metallic sounds in a short amount of time, the man and Jian Chen continued to fight for 100 blows. The two were traveling at speeds so fast they were almost invisible to the naked eye. The only difference was that while the man was relying on his battle skill in order to strike at such high speeds, Jian Chen was relying on his own strength to lash out at equal speeds. What a fast speed! The fire sword youth cried out in shock. His sword is too fast, even I find it hard to keep track of the real one. The purple-robed man spoke in amazement. What a fast sword, just what did he do in order to reach a speed where he could fight against the battle skill of Zhigu? Qin Ji asked in amazement. Even I'm curious about this. A 6th cycle Earth Saint Master with the wind attribute would find it difficult to achieve such a speed. His saint force is clearly not of the wind attribute, yet he is still able to achieve such a speed. It makes me feel too astonished, just what is helping his arm swing that fast? Second technique of the divine spear, divine dragon's tail. A bright red spear flew into the air before smashing downward with an extreme amount of force onto Jian Chen. At the same time, an intense amount of pressure pressed down onto him as if it was a heavy stone, causing Jian Chen to feel unable to advance a single step. Without fear, Jian Chen lifted his sword and with a large amount of sword chi, he met the spear head-on. Bang! Following a loud explosion, a large ripple of energy surrounded Jian Chen as he was forced back several steps with his arms trembling slightly. Following his backward momentum, 2 small ditches could be seen from the drag. As an earth-tier battle skill, the second technique and first technique were equal in strength almost. Third technique, all-conquering divine spear. Just as Jianchen regained his footing, Zhigu roared once more as the fire-red-colored light began to shine brightly. A large amount of compressed berserk energy began to form on the tip of the spear. Jianchen suddenly felt as if that this spear was undodgeable, as if the spear was locked onto him. The only option left was to take it head-on. Jianchen closed his eyes slowly as he carefully monitored Zhigu's position. At this moment, his spirit and the light wind sword in his hand established a deep connection that caused the sword to grow colder as a bright amount of sword chi burst out. As the sword was completely enveloped, it suddenly left Jianchen's hand with a burst of silver light before shooting forward. Bang! Another loud bang could be heard as the compressed energy on the spear's tip lost its equilibrium. Exploding violently, the explosion looked as if there was a beautiful flower on the spear. It continued to expand as the bright red light stunned everyone that saw it. The dirt from the ground went flying as the powerful energy scattered through the entire area and forced everyone around 100 meters back, while Jianchen and Zhigu were drowned within the energy. In half a moment, the energy dissipated completely, revealing Jianchen and Zhigu's positions to everyone else. The two men looked completely intact and had only suffered a small bit of damage from the energy blast, with their clothes a bit disheveled. The binding on Jianchen's hair had already been lost, causing Jianchen's long hair to dance in the hurricane-like wind. In his right hand was the same silver light wind sword. Right in front of him, Zhigu remained in his spear-wielding stance while his body continued to remain in that position without moving. The hair that used to reach down to his waist had been severed so that only the hair from the neck up remained. Suddenly, Zhigu's throat began to show some blood before a small thin line began to expand across his throat. In a split second, the line became bright red in color, and, in the next second, Zhigu's entire head separated from his body and fell to the ground. Everyone looking at this spectacle went into an uproar as they all looked at Jianchen and Zhigu's corpse with complete and utter shock. In that split second, they all didn't know what had happened. They could all see that Zhigu had launched the final attack of his Earth-tier battle skills, but Jianchen had neither died nor suffered any heavy injuries. They hadn't expected this outcome where Jianchen would stand without a scratch after the Earth-tier battle skill was released. Even more so, they didn't imagine that the unbelievably strong Zhigu would have his head drop to the ground. Just how did Zhigu die? What happened in that one split second? Everyone began to think about these questions as they swirled around in their minds. To dare kill one of our Jetta clansmen, you are seeking death. In that moment, a furious person roared as a 30-year-old youth with a meter-long sword flew at Jianchen. A fire-like saint force began to billow out from him, causing everyone to look at him with shock. What a strong burst of energy! Could he be a heaven saint master? A few of the Earth Saint Masters who thought themselves as the strongest began to look on with shock. Even Jianchen's face grew deathly serious as he saw the ruler armament in the youth's hand. This would be the second ruler armament he had seen in this place, and the both of them were swords of the fire element. Die! The youth stared at Jianchen as he swung down his ruler armament. Jianchen was already familiar with what a ruler armament was, so without daring to meet it head-on, he retreated backward. At the same time, a bright golden light flashed from behind as it flew toward the ruler armament. Chapter 312, Gathering of the Five Experts. 3. The golden light that appeared behind Jianchen suddenly struck against the ruler armament with a loud ear-ringing sound. Another blast of energy flew out from the collision and spread out toward everyone watching. Those with the strength of a great Saint Master within 100 meters were instantly sent flying away. Against such an intense amount of energy, only those with an Earth Saint Master level of strength would be able to stand their ground. The golden light that had struck against the youth's ruler armament caused him to be shocked before the explosion, and shockwave sent him flying back several meters. When he regained his footing, his face was already beginning to pale. Ruler armaments were extremely strong, and when two ruler armaments clashed in such a close proximity, even an Earth Saint Master would be hit with a strong feedback. That recent explosion that happened right in front of the youth's eyes had clearly dealt some minor damage to him, but because his strength wasn't all that strong, if he were to discard his ruler armament, he would be weaker than Zhigu. The youth holding the ruler armament looked at the longbow-wielding girl behind Jian Chen with a terrified look as he spoke out, stuttering, "Are you El ruler armament?" The girl didn't reply to the man and lowered her bow slightly. Then, her hand gripped the longbow tightly and prepared to fire off a second arrow. "I didn't think there'd be another ruler armament here, let alone a longbow-modeled one." The 2-meter fire sword-wielding man spoke with amazement toward the longbow. Qin Ji let out a long sigh as he stared at the sight with a complicated look. "Second uncle, it seems that your guess was correct, that longbow is definitely a ruler armament." The middle-aged man standing right next to Qin Ji smiled faintly. "I truly didn't think that longbow would be a ruler armament." "How unexpected, that means there are 6 ruler armaments here. The chances of killing those magical beasts have just risen. It is a shame that Zhigu has died, taking out a good amount of our forces." Qin Ji laughed. "Second uncle, although Zhigu has died, another person with an unexpected amount of strength has appeared. It seems to me that he is by no means weaker and will be a great boost to our strength." "That is correct." The appearance of the Solunar Bao caused the youth who came out to avenge the death of Zhigu to waver before standing still and shouting, "Who are you?" "That is my question to you." Jian Chen spoke out calmly. Although he was afraid of getting hit with a ruler armament, he didn't show it on his face. The youth looked at Jian Chen with disdain before looking back to the girl and spoke proudly, "This one is called Jiedo Wukong." Within this isolated world, Jiedo Wukong's name had been known to everyone as one of the 5 experts. Jian Chen, who had been scoffed by Jiedo Wukong, laughed coldly. "So you're Jiedo Wukong, you're nothing much then. If you were to go without your ruler armament, then you would not even be an opponent for me to kill. You are courting death." Jian Chen's words reversed the scale of Jiedo Wukong, causing him to immediately blow up in anger. Holding his ruler armament, he flew at Jian Chen, but before he could get far with his outstretched ruler armament, he immediately stopped. The girl had notched her Solunar Bao once more and was already aiming the bow at him. Jiedo Wukong's face went white for a moment. While they both had ruler armaments, a bow always held the advantage in a long-range battle. If he were to be shot, even if he were to block it with his ruler armament, the mighty explosion that would happen after would force him to eat up a loss. To him, eating up a loss was not an outcome he wanted. He would definitely come out the loser since the golden arrows were too fast for him to dodge. Thus, Jiedo Wukong was stuck in a difficult situation to retreat from. Seeing how Jiedo Wukong was stuck in a difficult situation where he could neither retreat or advance, a laugh could be heard in the crowd. He, just what lively event is happening here, who's fighting? It's surely a large battle if I can feel the mountains shake. You've scared this girl half to death almost." With that, a pink-robed girl walked past the crowd with small quick steps. By her side, she was followed by 2 expressionless men. This was a fully matured girl who looked to be around 26 years old. Her entire body seemed to exude an endless amount of charm, and with every movement, it seemed that she was able to enrapture anyone nearby. The pink-robed girl's appearance could only be described as devastatingly beautiful, that was exceedingly rare under the heavens. With her charm exuding from her body, she was as deadly as the yellow-robed girl in terms of beauty and killing intent, giving everyone else the feeling, a desire to conquer her. Ha, this girl comes from the Tianmu clan with the first name Ling. I hope every big brother here looks after me carefully. The pink-robed girl laughed with a crisp sound, almost as if it carried an enchanting spell. Those with a low control of themselves began to feel lost. Tianmu Ling, could she be the Tianmu Ling from the 5 experts? A person cried out in shock. While everyone knew the names of the 5 experts, some of them had never seen what they had looked like before. Everyone looked at Tianmu Ling with a strange look as they all thought to themselves with some shock. None of them had imagined that Tianmu Ling would be a charming girl and was at the same time a little unconventional in her attitude. Tianmu Ling slowly looked around herself before seeing the still motionless figure of Jiedo Wukong and laughed. "This younger brother is quite strong. The sword in your hand must be some sort of strange saint weapon to be able to cause this little girl's heart to flutter with such fear." With that, Tianmu Ling took on a scared expression, making herself seem quite pitiful. Jiedo Wukong had an embarrassed smile on his face as he tried to use this as a way to escape from the situation. He slowly put down his ruler armament and spoke proudly, "This one is called Jiedo Wukong. This saint weapon is the treasure of my Jiedo clan. Rumors say that it is the byproduct of the first generation and possesses a boundless amount of energy. It is so strong that if a sixth cycle Earth Saint Master were to use this sword, then it would be capable of killing a Heaven Saint Master." Wow, how strong! Tian Muling had a look of shock on her face as she put her jade white fingers up to cover her mouth. This type of reaction caused Jiedo Wukong to feel even more proud of himself. Then what might the other big brothers be called? Tian Muling looked at everyone else that had some sort of authority within the crowd. "This one is Qin Ji." The white and gold-lined robed youth cupped his hands together with a gentle smile. "This one is called Du Gafeng." The other man with a 2-meter-long sword made of a fiery red color cupped his hands as well. "Wa, Qin Ji, Du Gafeng, and Jiedo Wukong, you three are all men this little girl has heard before." This girl didn't think that 3 of the 5 experts would appear right in front of her or that these 3 elite big brothers would be so handsome that my heart would start to dance and leap. Tian Muling was like an 18-year-old girl that was staring with eyes of infatuation. It was as if she was meeting her adored idol as her eyes suddenly turned into stars. "And what might little sister be called? Could you call me big sister?" Tian Muling turned to look at the yellow-clothed girl with a smile. "Humph." The girl snorted before turning her head in disgust. Tian Muling seemed to have ignored that as she turned toward Jian Chen with a smile in one smooth transition. "Then this little brother must be one of the 5 experts, Shi Xiangran. This one is Jian Chen, not Shi Xiangran." Jian Chen spoke calmly. A look of surprise appeared on Tian Muling's face before instantly going away as she laughed. "Little brother Jian Chen, you are quite handsome. So handsome that I almost went crazy. You should take responsibility for this." After hearing this, although Jian Chen knew that Tian Muling was only joking, he couldn't help but feel a giant sweat drop fall down his forehead. The yellow-clothed girl suddenly spat something out in anger. "Oh! Could little sister here be jealous?" Tian Muling laughed as she looked at the other girl while ignoring the insult that was thrown out. The beautiful face of the girl suddenly turned red as her chest began to heave up and down before staring angrily at Tian Muling. She started to fume angrily as she growled, "You should speak less garbage. Ayo, little sister has a large temper. This can't do, girl, you must be gentle, or else no man will like you." Tian Muling beamed. The yellow-clothed girl said nothing else. Suddenly, another set of footsteps could be heard as a 27-year-old youth wearing white slowly came into view. Jian Chen quickly took notice of this youth. From his appearance, Jian Chen's eyes suddenly took on a dangerous gleam. This person was Shi Xiangran. The differences between all of the 5 experts that were there including Tian Muling was every single person had a few strong experts with them. However, Shi Xiangran was traveling by himself. Shi Xiangran didn't notice Jian Chen yet, but the moment he saw the bright clothes of one of the people, his eyes took notice of the yellow-clothed girl and suddenly stopped. In an instant, the light wind sword appeared in Jian Chen's hand. He couldn't reveal the secret with his soul sword just yet, so the sword stayed in his hand. With a silver flash of light, he flew toward Shi Xiangran before stabbing at his throat with unbelievable speed. He had to kill Shi Xiangran before he could utilize his barrier, otherwise, once that barrier went up, then he would be invincible while using his ruler armament. Shi Xiangran hadn't yet realized Jian Chen was there, but the very moment he had noticed the yellow-clothed girl, he instinctively thought to the lunar bow and unveiled his barrier without hesitation. The very moment the light wind sword was about to pierce through his throat, a transparent barrier suddenly appeared over his body. Bow! As the barrier appeared, it suddenly shook violently as the sword qi on the light wind sword touched the very first layer of Shi Xiangran's throat. As it pierced the first layer of skin, it didn't reach any farther before being shot back out like a bullet due to the barrier. Jian Chen's eyes flashed dangerously once more as the light wind sword began to release an even larger amount of sword qi as he tried to stab at Shi Xiangran's throat once more. Shi Xiangran's barrier began to shake violently, but because of its unbelievably strong defenses, the light wind sword was unable to tear it apart. As the barrier continued to expand, the light wind sword was driven farther and farther back. Jian Chen let out a sigh in dejection before taking back the light wind sword. If he was just faster by a second, then he would have been able to kill Shi Xiangran. Seeing the light wind sword shoot away from him, Shi Xiangran suddenly turned pale with fright because he had absolutely no idea when the sword had approached him. He reached up with his hands to touch his neck only to feel a small sliver of blood leak out from the wound onto his finger. Shi Xiangran's face turned white at that. At the sight of blood, his forehead began to sweat heavily. It was at that moment that he had realized he was one step away from knocking on the doors to the underworld and nearly stepped through them. Chapter 313, Joining hands. Shi Xiangran's face continued to turn white at that. At the sight of blood, his forehead began to sweat heavily. It was at that moment that he had realized he was one step away from knocking on the doors to the underworld and nearly stepped across it. A furious anger began to swell up within Shi Xiangran's chest as he glared dangerously at Jian Chen. His eyes began to exude a treacherous amount of killing intent that went undisguised. Just now, if he hadn't been able to activate his barrier in time, he would have become a corpse. Furthermore, to die at the hands of someone that was younger than he was, to the high and mighty Shi Xiangran who spent his entire life being spoiled as the genius of the clan, was a humiliation that he could never forget. If I don't kill you today, then I will no longer write my name as Shi Xiangran. Shi Xiangran's eyes went bloodshot as he flew toward Jian Chen with an angry yell. From his space belt, he took out a small fist-sized iron chunk and threw it into the air. Quickly, the iron seal enlarged in midair and blocked the sunlight from above with a circumference of about 200 meters. Covering the sky of everyone nearby, the seal immediately came crashing down to the ground with a heavy wave of energy. The moment De Gufeng saw the iron seal above their heads, his eyes flashed dangerously before immediately taking out a long sword and slashed up with a fiery blaze. The very moment he slashed his sword, the surrounding temperature in the air suddenly increased by a terrifying amount. Even the 1-meter-long sword-wielder Jiedo Wukong looked up with disdain. Sneering, he leaped up into the air and struck at the seal with his sword of fiery blaze. Immediately, the temperature in the surrounding area increased once more, causing the vegetation in the area to dry up straight away. Even the trees that were reaching high into the air were beginning to shrivel up as if all of the water inside them was being evaporated. The fire was so strong, it was almost as if everyone was in a sea of fire. Qin Ji's face grew extremely dark as a machete appeared within his hand. The machete was surrounded by a cyan glow, but the shape of the machete itself was strange. The machete had a saw blade-like design where each tooth seemed to be inexplicably sharp. Qin Ji raised his machete and leaped into the air toward the seal of Treasure Mountain. With a single slash of cyan light, he struck out at the seal at the same time. Tian Muling revealed a long whip and laughed. This little brother has quite the temper. I haven't offended you, so could you please not go around randomly using things to smash into people? With that, her arms shook and brought the whip flying straight up at the seal. Whoosh! A flash of golden light flew past Jian Chen as the girl let loose her bowstring. An arrow of pure saint force condensed into shape as it flew at an unbelievable speed toward the seal. At this moment, the 5 experts had all unleashed their attacks each with their own ruler armament. The only difference was that 4 experts along with the yellow-clothed girl were fighting against one. Shi Xiangran's seal of Treasure Mountain encompassed 200 meters in circumference which towered over everyone there. In his rage-induced stupor, he had failed to notice that he had offended everyone there. By the time Shi Xiangran realized this fact, it was far too late. Bang! The 6 ruler armament crashed against each other, emitting a large ear-ringing sound. Immediately, the ground began to shake and mountains started to tremble as the largest amount of energy that day flew out from every corner as a result and blew over the 5 experts and Jian Chen. Everyone was unable to keep grounded to the floor and could only fly backward. With each step they tried to use to anchor themselves, they could only succeed in leaving a small footprint. Ha! The explosion rocked the ears of everyone in the vicinity with an explosive sound. Everyone tried to use their Saint Force to coat themselves in it in order to protect themselves from the blast radius. Out of everyone present, the only one who felt safe at all was Shi Xiangran because of his barrier. The defenses to his barrier were so strong that despite the intense aftermath, he would not be harmed. The worst that would happen was that he would be blown backward. 4 of the ruler armaments returned to their owner's hand as the 5th ruler armament, the seal of Treasure Mountain, was hit by a combined amount of force high up in the air. Instead of landing back down to the ground, it returned to Shi Xiangran's hand. The energy that had exploded outward completely destroyed the area as well as throwing all nearby trees into the air and flattened the grass before incinerating it. On the ground, there was a single fissure with a large series of spiderweb cracks extending out from it. After a while, the energy finally subsided into a tranquil scene. For a kilometer, not a single blade of grass could be seen and the trees were scattered about. Shi Xiangran, who was situated inside the barrier, looked as if his face could leak water. In his heart, he had felt inexplicable resentment. He hadn't thought that in his one single strike, he would somehow offend everyone there. Thus, he blamed everything on Jian Chen. Tian Muling returned the whip before adopting a face of traumatized fear and placing a hand to her chest. How scary. That iron seal is too scary. Big brother, I can only assume that you are Shi Xiangran of the 5 experts. Ayo, why can't this little girl remember when I offended Big Brother? Just why is it that the moment Big Brother appeared, he wanted to kill us all? It's a good thing this little girl has some self-protection and so many big brothers to help us in this time of need. Otherwise, this little girl would have been smashed to the ground. Hearing Tian Muling speak, Shi Xiangran's face grew even darker and darker. Before he could say anything, his face instantly returned to normal and then adopting an apologetic expression and cupped his hands together. I apologize everyone, when I saw a hated enemy of mine, I had somehow made a silly mistake. This one is called Shi Xiangran. I've no intentions on being anyone's enemy. I hope no one pays too much attention to this. Turning to point at Jian Chen, he said, do you dare to see who's stronger between us two? Or could it be you only know how to hide behind a woman? If it's like this, how are you any different from a coward? Shi Xiangran spoke with disdain to Jian Chen. Jian Chen's face grew dark as he stared dangerously at Shi Xiangran with an undisguised amount of killing intent. As a large amount of Saint Force concentrated in his hand and formed the light wind sword before slowly walking toward Shi Xiangran. Right now, he planned to use the azure and violet sword Qi in an attempt to test an idea. Although he wasn't sure if they would be able to destroy the barrier, Jian Chen could still wish. Seeing how Jian Chen still desired to fight Shi Xiangran, the yellow-clothed girl couldn't help but feel anxious before running up to stop Jian Chen. Facing Shi Xiangran with an angry look, she spoke, Shi Xiangran, you despicable bastard, if it weren't for that barrier protecting you, you would have been killed long ago. Just what qualifications do you have to issue a challenge? If you are a man, then get rid of your barrier and fight like a man would. Shi Xiangran's face suddenly grew unsightly as he heard the girl's words. Those words were coincidentally the very words that stabbed at Shi Xiangran's weak point. Staring icily at her, he roared, you repulsive bitch. You, the girl started as her eyes furiously bore a hole into Shi Xiangran. From her eyes, it seemed as if she was ready to cut Shi Xiangran into a million pieces. At that moment, Qin Ji walked in between the two and cupped his hands. Fellow friends, please listen to my words for a moment. Before waiting for the two to respond, he said, we have all gathered here today in order to find out the answer to the secret here. We shouldn't be wasting any times on useless things. Right in front of us is the Immortal's Cave. This much everyone can attest to seeing, but there are several strong magical beasts guarding it. Even if we all have ruler armaments, it would still be very difficult to enter the area. So, I wish that we can all put aside our grievances and work together. As long as we can defeat all the magical beasts, we will be able to enter the cave and see the inner treasures. Otherwise, I'm afraid we will never be able to enter since there is only 10 days left until this round of the competition is over. That's right, if we want to enter the cave, then there is no other choice but to join hands. Those magical beasts are far too strong for us individually," said Dugafeng with his fire sword in hand as one of the men with a ruler armament. "Ha ha ha, that's right. Fellow big brothers, it would be better for you to temporarily give up your hatred. Getting into the cave is of the utmost priority. I've heard there was a heaven-tier battle skill in there, that is a monumental prize. Plus, this is the cave of a senior cultivator, even if there isn't a heaven-tier battle skill, there'll definitely be a treasure of sorts in there," Tian Muling said. "Right now there's only 10 days until the end of this round of the competition. When we get transported out by the strange energy, we'll be powerless to try and remain here. If we wish to enter the cave, then we must all unite." The purple-robed man next to Dugafeng spoke. Hearing his words, Jian Chen's eyes continued to flash continuously with some hesitation. In the end, he reclaimed his light wind sword. A heaven-tier battle skill was something he desperately wanted. Joining the gathering of the mercenaries was for the sake of obtaining one so that he could hand it over to the Changyang clan. One could imagine that if the Changyang clan were to obtain a heaven-tier battle skill, their strength would improve greatly. If the Changyang clan's strength was to increase to a sufficient amount, then he wouldn't need to hide from the Huayun sect and return to the gentle home that he remembered as well as the kind and loving mother he had. Chapter 314, Division of People. Shi Xiangran sneered as he shot a venomous glare at Jian Chen. "You're lucky, I'll let you go for now." With that, Shi Xiangran returned the seal of Treasure Mountain to his space ring, but the barrier remained activated to protect himself. Jian Chen couldn't help but fire back, "You should stay in that tortoise shell forever. Let's see just how long that will last." For the barrier that a saint ruler paid a heavy price to make be called a tortoise shell, Shi Xiangran's face went ashen as he heard Jian Chen. Upon hearing those words, Qin Ji, Jetta Wukong, Dugafeng, and Tian Muling all began to smile unnaturally. "Ha ha ha, for someone to say the barrier left behind by a saint ruler's saint force is a tortoise shell, this little girl has lived for some time, but this is the first time I've heard of such a thing. Little brother Jian Chen is far too unique." Tian Muling laughed. "Well then everyone, there's not much time left. We should plan accordingly now that we have 6 ruler armaments here. We'll definitely be able to destroy those magical beasts and reduce the casualties to an absolute minimum." Qin Ji spoke. By now, the battle was over. That intense amount of energy that had rippled across the area for a kilometer had finally receded and many Earth Saint Masters had already returned. No wonder they are called the 5 experts, their strength is far too strong. Just what was that 200-meter object? It seemed extremely powerful. I heard them call it a ruler armament. Strange, just what is that? I've never heard of such a thing before. Many of the men there began to chat among themselves in quiet voices with a fear of speaking too loud. There are a total of 4 magical beasts, each one of is a rare species and are individually very strong. It requires 2 of us with a ruler armament in order to fight one of them to a standstill. I can only guess that it would take 3 of us with a ruler armament in order to kill one of the magical beasts. We have 6 ruler armament users, meaning that we can kill 2 of them. The other 2 will have to be dealt with by the others. Qin Ji spoke seriously. We have plenty of Earth Saint Masters, with the last 2 magical beasts, they'll be able to deal with them. Although no one else would have a ruler armament, the amount of Earth Saint Masters is enough to be able to handle any problem. Dugafeng said. That's correct, Qin Ji nodded his head. If we all work together, then we will be able to break past the defensive line of the magical beasts. I agree to this plan. Dugafeng endorsed. I agree as well. Jetta Wukong spoke out. 3 of the 5 experts had all agreed while the other 2 remained silent. Brother Jian Chen, if we may have your opinion. Qin Ji looked toward the yellow-clothed girl and Jian Chen and then the 4 men behind them. With a single glance, he knew that Jian Chen and the girl were both the pillars of their group. I see no problems. Jian Chen smiled. The girl said nothing and only nodded her head in agreement. Seeing the strongest 2 of the group give their agreement, Qin Ji had a look of excitement on his face. Then, with a look around the area, he spoke in a loud voice, "Everyone, now that the 5 experts have all united to enter the Immortals' Cave, I hope that everyone will stand with us. Our combined strength will be enough to kill the magical beasts, and whoever enters the cave will be able to take their own treasure." As soon as Qin Ji finished his speech, everyone stood up at once and began to cheer loudly. Each one of these men were at least at the Great Saint Master level, if not higher. If you are not an Earth Saint Master, then don't throw your life away. We are only inviting Earth Saint Masters to fight with us. De Gufeng yelled out loud, causing those of the Great Saint Masters to be displeased by this. After this, the Great Saint Masters could only retreat away from the campgrounds, leaving behind around 70 men. Each one of them were Earth Saint Masters with a strong background and a determined face. Good, then let's have everyone here so we can plan things out. I propose that we split up into 4 groups, each one will deal with a single magical beast. Does anyone have any opinions? Qin Ji spoke. This plan's fine, I agree. I agree as well. Everyone began to ask their questions. Just who will be in which of the 4 divisions? A person asked. Qin Ji smiled, when it comes to this, I've already a plan. The inner group here has enough people to split into 2 groups of 10. The rest of the 70 men here should split into 2 groups as well. 2 groups of 35 men, does anyone have any objections? The inner group Qin Ji had mentioned were all standing right next to him. Some were the 5 experts, including Jian Chen's group. It looked as though the men on the outside had the advantage, but that wasn't it. Those in the inner group were all the strongest individuals, and a few of them could easily fight against 3 other men at their level of strength with ease. Right now we should split our groups then. Qin Ji looked at Jian Chen and the girl with a smile. Jian Chen, would it be possible for us to be on the same division? Seeing Qin Ji take the initiative to be friendly, Jian Chen was caught off guard for a moment before recovering himself quickly. If brother Qin Ji is with us, then it would be our honor. Little brother, you are so handsome. This elder sister wants to be with you. You wouldn't refuse me, would you? Tian Muling walked to Jian Chen at a leisurely pace and a huff of air exhaling out of her mouth. Jian Chen laughed with a collected face and calm heart. This one has no objections, but only brother Qin Ji can accept. I've no objections either. Sister Tian Muling is welcome to join. Qin Ji spoke with a graceful smile toward her. Ha ha ha, little sister, you look ill. Could it be you don't want elder sister joining you? Ha ha ha, little sister, you don't need to worry. Sister here won't snatch this handsome brother away from you. Tian Muling spoke with charm toward the yellow-clothed girl. You should speak less crap. The girl fumed as her eyes stared furiously at the girl as if she could spit fire from them. Ha ha ha, little sister has a huge temper. That can't do, little girl, you have to be gentle. Be considerate and men will love you. Like this, you won't have any men that'll treat you right. Tian Muling seemed as if she was never angry and constantly laughed. The girl's response was particularly violent as she pulled back the bowstring of her lunar bow and pointed an arrow at her. If you continue to speak like this, don't blame me then. Ah! Tian Muling shrieked as she hid behind Jian Chen for protection. With a fearful face, she said, Little sister, your older sister was only just joking. Please don't be so impulsive, otherwise, little brother's life here might be threatened. With a helpless sigh, Jian Chen spoke, Tian Muling, it's best if you stop teasing her. She has a bad temper. Ha ha ha, little brother's words here are all too correct. Little sister's temper is quite bad. Tian Muling laughed sillily but stopped teasing her. The people around them looked on as if they were watching a performance with a small smile on their faces, but no one said anything. Afterward, the 4 divisions were quickly split up. Jian Chen, the yellow-clothed girl, Tian Muling, and Qin Ji were all in one division along with the 2 expressionless men with Tian Muling, Qin Ji's 3 middle-aged companions, Seniorin, Yunzheng, Qin Ju and Qin Shao. The 2nd division was composed of Jie Wukong, De Gufeng and several men. Only Shi Xiangran was left alone in that group without any companions. While these two groups weren't numerous in men, they still had 3 ruler armament users per division and extremely strong men. The 70 Earth Saint Masters were split into 2 divisions of 30, but since each person in both divisions had no experience working with each other, these 2 groups were the weakest of the 4. Everyone should rest up for today so that we will be at the peak of our power. Tomorrow, we will set out. With that, everyone began to set up their tents. There was enough room for everyone to set up a tent because of the battle that cleared out a kilometer of land, becoming a flat clearing. As for the great Saint Masters who were denied an invitation to fight, not a single one of them left. Together, they garrisoned themselves farther away in hopes that they could take advantage of the chaos and slip in. Within their own tents, Jian Chen addressed Signorin, Yunzheng, Qin Zhu, and Qin Shao, whether or not you wish to follow me or leave, just tell me. However, while the magical beasts are extremely strong, they are not the biggest threat. The biggest threat to us are those fighting with us. On the outside everyone is fighting for the same purpose to kill those magical beasts, but the moment we enter the Immortals' Cave, our alliance will undoubtedly crumble and fall into a chaotic battle. Jian Chen, I've known this already, but my strength is far too weak to help you. Even if I were to go and fight, I wouldn't be able to handle the aftermath from all of the explosions created from the battle. So I'll wait outside for you all. Qin Shao spoke with no hesitation and spoke of his plan. Qin Zhao's withdrawal was something that Jian Chen had expected. Even if Qin Shao were to enter, Jian Chen wouldn't be able to protect him. What about you 3? Jian Chen asked the other 3. I'll stay behind. Qin Zhu spoke out loud. Signorin and Yunzheng both gave each other a look before hesitating. Signorin then spoke up, Brother Jian Chen, I'll enter with you. Although our strength isn't on par with yours, our strength is still quite decent. Then I'll follow you in. Yunzheng said. Chapter 315, Entering the Immortals' Cave, 1. On the second day, everyone cleaned up their tents and formed a dense group within the forest. Shi Xiangran was afraid of Jian Chen's initial strike that he had delivered, causing him to keep up his barrier without the slightest intention of dropping it. Standing on the road, Qin Ji spoke to the others, there are only 4 magical beasts guarding the Immortals' Cave. The names of each of these strong magical beasts is the Flying Spirit Snake, Amethyst Thunder Lion, Albino Earthworm, and the Pangolin Emperor. After these several days of fighting them, we've already established that their strength is the same as each other. The only difference is their innate skills. The Flying Spirit Snake is capable of flight and spits out an extremely potent poison. If it flies, then it will be extremely hard to deal with. The Amethyst Thunder Lion has a protective layer of amethyst scales that have an extremely high defense. It can also spit out lightning as well as discharge electricity from its body. It would be the best for everyone to stay away from it. The albino earthworm is a special variation of an earthworm. It has an equally strong defense to the Amethyst Thunder Lion, but its only weakness is that it is slow. For anyone with an wind attribute Saint Force, they will find the albino earthworm easier to manage than the other 3. The last one is the Pangolin Emperor and the biggest headache. Its attack strength isn't as strong as the other 3, but the most annoying trait about it is that it is especially fast. In a single moment, it can drill deep into the earth to evade our attacks and then strike out from underneath. It is completely silent when it is in the earth and leaves behind no trace. It can attack from underneath one's foot at any time, and while it is the weakest in terms of attacks, its attacks are generally unblockable. At the mention of the Pangolin Emperor, Qin Ji's eyes narrowed angrily. Clearly, he had eaten up a heavy loss from it already. Qin Ji, which magical beast do you think we should take on? Jian Chen asked from the side. Does it need to be said? Of course we want the Flying Spirit Snake. We have 3 ruler armaments, and one of them is a longbow model. If the Flying Spirit Snake were to take to the skies, then we could shoot it down. We also have a whip that can tether and restrict the snake's mobility. At the very least, we could prevent it from taking to the skies. The 2 weapons are the bane of the Flying Spirit Snake. Qin Ji spoke with no hesitation. Jianshan thought for a moment before nodding his head in agreement. Yes, then the flying spirit snake poses less of a threat to use than the other magical beasts, let's take it. Hearing Qin Ji speak, the seated Dugu Feng spoke up. The albino's earthworm has extremely strong defenses and has a lot of strength as well. The average Earth Saint Master wouldn't be able to do any damage to it, and without a ruler armament, its defenses cannot be pierced. My division will take this one. The Amethyst Thunder Lion and Pangolin Emperor will be handled by the other two divisions. In a flash, the discussion was over. The most annoying magical beast, the Pangolin Emperor, who had an unavoidable and unblockable attack, and the strongest magical beast, the Amethyst Thunder Lion, were given to the last two divisions. Although the men in those two divisions were displeased, they weren't able to say anything. The flying spirit snake was capable of flight, which would render all those on the ground helpless. It would also be able to strike at the men on the ground with its poison, so this magical beast was best suited for the group with the longbow and whip user. As for the albino earthworm, many men were of the same mind of as well. As were all magical beasts that held the character for dragon in their name, the defenses of the albino earthworm were as strong as Dugu Feng had said. The average Earth Saint Master would be incapable of doing harm to its body, and since it also had an extremely high defense, it was only fair that 3 ruler armaments were needed to harm and kill it. Although the Pangolin Emperor and Amethyst Thunder Lion were both hard to deal with, the remaining 2 divisions were strong in their own right and had many people. With at least 30 Earth Saint Masters against a single magical beast, the problem shouldn't be that big. After walking for 10 kilometers, everyone came to a stop as they spotted the remains of a battleground. Suddenly, the loud roar of a magical beast could be heard as it shook both the heavens and the earth with an ear-splitting sound. Then, 3 enormous magical beasts came into view. One massive python of large width with a head bigger than the height of a fully matured man and black wings. This was the flying spirit snake. Right next to the flying spirit snake was a large lion. Its head was incredibly ferocious looking and had amethyst-colored scales layered all over its body. Occasionally, a ripple of electricity would dance across its body. This was the Amethyst Thunder Lion. To the side of Amethyst Thunder Lion was a gecko-like magical beast that was a meter tall and 10 meters long. 4 stumpy legs held it up from the ground, and its body was completely covered by brown-colored scales. As these 3 magical beasts appeared, a strong presence could suddenly be felt, pressing against everyone's chest as if there were a heavy stone there, making it difficult to move. Together now, the Pangolin Emperor might still be underground, so be careful. Dugu Feng said as he held up his flame sword and charged toward the albino earthworm. Following straight behind, Shi Xiangran and Jieto Wukong and their group charged with their weapons out. At that moment, aside from the Pangolin Emperor, the other 3 magical beasts began to take action. Whoosh! With a flash of golden light, the yellow-clothed girl shot an arrow from her lunar bow toward the flying spirit snake. Bang! The arrow collided against the flying spirit snake with an explosive sound. The snake's entire body began to spasm for a moment before settling once more. On its giant body, a single bloody hole could be seen. With an enormous hissing sound that stung the ears, the snake flew toward the yellow-clothed girl. Qin Ji raised his machete and roared, "Use the whip to bind its body." Tian Muling flew forward with a serious expression. In an instant, the whip in her hands blurred as it flew toward the snake's body. While in midair, the whip began to extend before becoming a 100-meter-long cord that wrapped around the 2 wings and bound it shut, preventing it from flying. Forward! Qin Ji roared. With his ruler armament in the air, he and 3 other men flew at the flying spirit snake. At the same time, Jian Chen's body blurred away as he flew at the flying spirit snake as well with his light wind sword. Senioran and Yunzheng both followed close behind Jian Chen. Bang! An explosive sound and a billow of energy pulsed out like an ocean of energy. The surrounding area quickly went to ruins as the 3 other divisions began to fight as well. Chapter 316, Entering the Immortal's Cave, 2. As the battle continued on for some time, a cry filled with pain could be heard on the battlefield as a middle-aged man was bitten from the waist down by a creature whose head looked like a mouse, dragging him down beneath the ground. That's the Pangolin Emperor. The Pangolin Emperor is here, everyone be careful of the ground. As soon as everyone heard the yell, they all stared intently at the ground. At that moment, right in front of the group, a large golden-colored rat-like beast flew up from the ground with the upper half of a man in its mouth. Be careful, the Pangolin Emperor is here. Hurry up and attack it, don't let it escape into the ground. As soon as the Pangolin Emperor appeared, everyone began to shout out loud as they charged at the Pangolin Emperor. The Pangolin Emperor was extremely fast and immediately flew back into the ground after swallowing the body in its mouth. Even when 3 saint weapons slashed at its body, only sparks could be seen. The Pangolin Emperor was a scaled magical beast with golden scales all over its body. Despite its defenses not being as strong as the albino earthworm, it was still stronger than what the average Earth Saint Master could damage. An incredibly sharp spike arose from the ground and instantly speared through the hip of a man before he could even react. Ah! The man cried out in a shrill voice before thrusting his fire attribute saint weapon into the ground in hopes of exposing the Pangolin Emperor from its subterranean hiding spot. All that he hit was earth as the Pangolin Emperor had already moved on from the area. An intense purple light flashed as the entire world shook all of a sudden. By the side, the amethyst thunder lion shot out a blue spear of lightning that arced toward the closest person, burning his body black, which caused him to fall to the ground. Several men struck out at the lion immediately with their saint weapons, creating a clanking sound as they smashed against its scales with some sparks and blood. Although the amethyst thunder lion's defenses weren't all too weak, it wasn't capable of defending against a barrage of blows without taking some damage. An angry roar was emitted from the lion's mouth as it swiped its sharp claws at the surrounding people attacking it. Another arc of lightning was spat out from the lion's mouth and struck the closest person without giving him a chance to dodge. In that instant, 10 of the 30 Earth Saint Masters that had attacked the amethyst thunder lion had been shocked by the lightning and fell to the floor with charcoal black bodies. Another 3 men were torn apart by the lion's claws, dying instantly and injuring several others. The power of an amethyst thunder lion was incredibly strong, and so those fighting against the lion would suffer the most casualties. On the other side, the groups fighting the flying spirit snake and the albino earthworm were having an easy time. The 2 divisions both had 3 ruler armament user and were strong in their own right, making it hard for their group to suffer any casualties. Qin Ji brought up his ruler armament and swung it down onto the albino earthworm, easily cutting past the scales on its body and bringing a decent amount of damage to it. In a short moment, the entire body of the albino earthworm was dyed bright red with its blood. The flying spirit snake wasn't much stronger than the albino earthworm, especially with its wings restricted by Tian Muling's whip. Although she wasn't displaying the full might of her ruler armament, it was still enough to contend against the flying spirit snake. In the end, the snake's strength while bound up was far less than before, which impacted it majorly, so only around 60% of its full power could be displayed. Qin Ji's ruler armament struck against the body of the flying spirit snake and left behind a deep 1-meter-long gash, causing it to cry out. The yellow-clothed girl stood far away and shot arrow after arrow from her longbow. Each golden arrow flew toward the head of snake. With a violent hissing sound, the snake began to sway its head side to side as blood dripped down. Jian Shen and the other men began to fly at the snake with their saint weapons ready to attack. On its head, each person swung down to deliver a heavy stroke. Despite each magical beast being quite strong, the humans attacking them at the same time was far too much. Each man was an Earth Saint Master at the least, and taking a hit from them was taxing on their strength. As for the flying spirit snake and the albino earthworm, taking on 3 ruler armaments each brought about even more damage than what the amethyst thunder lion had caused. As of right now, only the Pangolin Emperor had an advantage over the other side and was in good condition. The flying spirit snake continued to struggle fiercely against the bindings but to no avail. The wounds on its body was growing more and more severe and its temper even more violent as it continued to be injured. Tian Muling's face grew serious as she bit her lower lip and concentrated while sweat pooled over her forehead. At the moment, she was completely focused on constraining the wings of the flying spirit snake. Suddenly, the flying spirit snake let out a loud hiss as a large amount of corrosive acid shot from its mouth headed in every direction. The very moment the poison landed on a person, the clothes and flesh of the area it landed on immediately melted away. The poison is too corrosive, it can penetrate through Saint force and in 2 hours it can kill even an Earth Saint Master. Retreat! Qin Ji commanded as the 3 men senior and quickly retreated back with him to escape from the poison. The cloud that was wafting up from the poison was already causing visibility to be almost non-existent, causing anyone on the outside to be unable to see what was happening within the area. Enveloped in a transparent barrier, Qin Ji disregarded all attempts at defense and leaped high into the air before coming down onto the snake, piercing it in its heart. Slash! The region near the heart of the flying spirit snake immediately ripped in a 1-meter gash as Qin Ji flew into the next strike and split apart the wound even further with his weapon once more. The flying spirit snake let out an ear-piercing hiss as it violently swung its body upright. In the next second, the tail of the snake smashed into Qin Ji's barrier. Although Qin Ji wasn't injured, the impact was enough to send him flying far away. As he flew through the air, Qin Ji's eyes widened suddenly. In an earth-shattering moment, he could see the blurry glows of an azure and violet ray of light through the poisonous mist. Aoo! In the next second, a desperate wail from the flying spirit snake could be heard. Within the poisonous mist, no one was capable of seeing what was happening, but they knew that something had obviously struck the ground heavily and shook it. The flying spirit snake continued to hiss in pain as its voice grew warped. The poisonous mist in the area began to swirl around madly as if something was shaping it into a random shape. The blood-soaked Jian Chen quickly flew out from the poisonous mist with the majority of his clothes melting away from the poison and some of the green poison still stuck to his body. Only the yellow-clothed girl was standing in front of him, and since there was a layer of poisonous mist covering his body, no one else was able to see Jian Chen. Jian Chen immediately took out a new set of clothes and quickly cleaned off the rest of the snake's poison before putting on the new set. Just like he was still in yesterday's clothes, Jian Chen flew around the poisonous mist with a smile to regroup with the rest. At that moment, the previously spasming flying spirit snake finally stilled as the poisonous mist dispersed as well, allowing everyone to see what happened within. The moment everyone could see, their faces went still with shock and amazement. Even Qin Ji was no different from the rest. The entire body of the flying spirit snake was on the ground, but the area where its heart was had been completely bisected away from the rest of its body. Blood splurted out from the wound in large amounts from its head-sized heart, which was also cut into 2 pieces. The flying spirit snake lay on the ground still alive, but it was not too far away from death, and the monster core had already disappeared from its body without a trace. Qin Ji couldn't help but think back to when he saw the blurry azure and violet glow. He had felt a great change overcome Jian Chen, but he didn't say anything as he felt doubt and confusion cloud his heart. Just then, the albino earthworm let out a terrible sound as well before collapsing to the ground with Shi Xiangran's seal of Treasure Mountain smashed on top of its head. Even its entire body had been smashed several times with the seal to make for a serious injury. Both the flying spirit snake and the albino earthworm were dead now. Only 2 remained. One was the amethyst thunder lion, which was prancing about. Despite the wounds on its body, there was nowhere near anything life-threatening. Its strength was far superior to those in its grade because of its innate skill and rarity. Even an Earth Saint Master could only hope to do a sliver of damage to it. The pangolin emperor was the most healthy one. Scuttling about underground, it would play hide and seek with those on top as if it were a game rather than a battle. Appearing and disappearing randomly before attacking people in a single instance, it left behind no traces and only a major headache. The divisions fighting both the Amethyst Thunder Lion and the Pangolin Emperor had taken major casualties. At least a dozen men died fighting the lion, while many more had taken serious damage as the Tenacious continued to struggle with it. As for the Pangolin Emperor, it had already swallowed 7 men while injuring a dozen others. The Pangolin Emperor hadn't even taken any damage yet. The Amethyst Thunder Lion is far too strong. Come and help us quickly, or we won't last much longer. Help us deal with the Pangolin Emperor. Seeing how the flying spirit snake and the albino earthworm were killed, the others cried out for assistance with glee. Quickly extracting the monster core from the albino earthworm, De Gufeng led his men into the forest without regard for the two divisions still fighting the magical beasts. Ignore them, let's go. Don't be left behind, the Immortal's cave is right in front of us. Qin Ji shouted to Jian Chen and the rest of the division as he brought 3 men with him to chase after De Gufeng. He did not care for the corpse of the Class 5 flying spirit snake. Without looking at the flying spirit snake's corpse, Jian Chen called out to the rest of the men to follow them into the forest. After making a mad dash, Jian Chen followed Qin Ji into a cave. This cave was unnaturally deep, and with every single interval, there was a single night pearl emanating a white glow of light. The interior and cave walls were glossy as well, meaning that someone had used an incredible amount of strength to cut the walls evenly. Bang! A loud sound could be heard up ahead as the entire passageway began to tremble. Jian Chen, the yellow-clothed girl, Tin Wuling, Yunzheng and Senior began to hasten their pace even more before quickly arriving at an area where everyone was gathered. Upon seeing Jian Chen enter the room, Shi Xiangran immediately activated his barrier to secure his safety. Right in front of everyone, a single stone door blocked their paths. Bastard, just who touched the mechanism here? It dropped a stone wall blocking our way in. Jiedo Wukong roared in anger as he held his ruler armament. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.